right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And let me start by thanking all of you for making it here bright and early, for braving the weather, and for finding your way to the third floor. We, as the facilitators, almost got lost yesterday, so you did better than us. My name is Daniel Brummond. I work for as a technical advisor for GIZ Fair Forward, and I have the honor of emceeing our way through this workshop today, where we will be exploring the role that open source AI tools can play in public service delivery. Around the globe, we've got voices from India, Kazakhstan, Kenya, and Mexico. And yeah, we'll be talking about the importance that digital public goods can play in this. The workshop is co-organized by GIZ and ITU under the patronage of two projects, one being the EU-funded Open Source Ecosystem Enabler Project, or short OSE, which is a collaboration between ITU, UNDP, and which basically aims to support and strengthen and make an impact with digital public goods. And the other one being the German Development Cooperation Initiative Fair Forward, Artificial Intelligence for All, which strives to democratize AI with partners in Africa and Asia. And we are implemented by GIZ on behalf of our Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. But now, without further ado, let me introduce our opening talk. And it's actually my pleasure to introduce Dr. Cosmos Lakison Tsavatsava, who is the director of the Telecommunication Development Bureau with the ITU. And Dr. Tsavatsava, I saw that you've got over 30 years of experience in the sector. So I believe it's fair to say that you dedicated your life to telecommunications and to promoting ICT projects around the globe. I'd particularly like to thank you for kicking us off today with your opening remarks. Dr. Tsavatsava, the floor is yours.
So good morning, everybody. Are we tired already? Yeah, so it is a pleasure for me to be here with you. I understand we are going to be talking about the unleashing of the power of open source AI to transform digital public services for a better tomorrow. I'm not going to take too much of your time, so I will try to be brief. But I think we are living in interesting times where AI meets open source. And I think that's very important. And I hope that you find this summit to be interesting to you. And you have been able to speak to humanoids, interact with machines and robots. And I hope you pause for a moment for you to think about existing digital gaps that exist across the globe and how we could create inclusive and open digital ecosystems. This aside, there is an incredible revolution that is happening in front of our eyes, I believe. But the question is, how can we make this revolution to benefit all regions and all peoples across the world? As countries work towards finding solutions to achieve digital transformation, open source is emerging as a significant contributor to these efforts. Governments and the entire ecosystem are seeking to build capacity in open source and using digital public goods to help accelerate digital government transformation and achieve, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And we are just 6 years away. I don't know whether we'll make it, but many countries are lagging behind. Ladies and gentlemen, the combination of open source and AI provides a powerful base to boost governments in their digital transformation journeys. Open source is a pivotal technology, while AI has tremendous opportunities if guided properly to represent or to present it to us tremendous opportunities for societal change, impacting people. As exemplified in several countries, AI can help governments offer more efficient and personalized public services to their citizens. And as you know, we have got 2.6 billion people who remain offline. And one of the reasons why they may not have interest or the confidence or the drive to go online is because governments are not rolling out government services, public services for them to stimulate demand. So we want to change this. The teaming of open source with AI and the data public goods environment is a huge emerging canvas of possibility on which many ideas can make their mark. It is poised to result into unprecedented ecosystem. As you may see from this summit and the ongoing global conversations, ITU is at the leading edge of AI to further its mission of achieving meaningful and universal connectivity, driving sustainable digital transformation. Together with other partners, ITU is working on more than 200 standards which are related to AI and machine learning standards. And so far, we have adopted about 100 standards. We are working towards the adoption of about 120 more standards. And of course, I recognize ISO and IEC through the World Standards Cooperation to tackle emerging AI standards in a coordinated way. Through the AI for Good initiative with 40 UN partners, and our role in co-chairing the Indigenous Working Group on AI with UNESCO, ITU facilitates global multi-stakeholder collaboration and UN system-wide coordination. As you well know, the General Assembly for the first time adopted a resolution on artificial intelligence, and the UN Secretary General established a high-level panel to deal with this subject matter. Our aim is to help member states leverage AI to propel the Sustainable Development Goals. To us, this means facilitating access to the building blocks of modern-day society. It is the very core of our open source ecosystem enabler project, a partnership between ITU and I recognize, of course, UNDP and the European Commission to help accelerate the creation of digital public goods and services across the globe. Our role is to help countries develop their own open source ecosystem through provision of custom-tailored education, training, and technical support. As we equip member states with the knowledge and the tools needed for AI, we are also conscious of the need to ensure that its benefits are accessible and equitable worldwide. As we move forward, we must recognize that AI software and the technology that powers it remain expensive and beyond reach of many. While AI may be an agent of change, it can also be a cause of concern, but also even exacerbate the digital divide that we have across regions and in the country, gender, urban and rural, and that concerns us. We should find ways to make AI affordable, accessible for good, and be able to transform our societies, communities, and regions. Open source AI in digital public services is an approach that can be used to drive positive change by creating the environment to freely reuse, modify, and redistribute the essential prerequisites or building blocks of artificial intelligence. So partnerships are at the core of what we seek to do. Building local digital skills and capacity is essential. You will be happy to note that the Telecommunication Development Bureau is playing a catalytic role through the establishment of dedicated open source program offices to help countries build these skills and capacity. Building upon this initiative, we also launched the Open Source Ecosystem Enabler, OSEE, which is designed to support governments of developing countries to effectively benefit from open source technologies. But here, I'm not just talking about South-South cooperation, I'm talking about triangular arrangements, because it is important for us to cooperate across regions, irrespective of the station of life where we find ourselves. Today, with these pioneering ventures, ITU is a thought leader in supporting the use, development, and the release of open source technologies for public goods and services. As such, we are also the main contributors to the creation of UN-wide source framework to boost, harmonize, and scale practices throughout UN agencies and member states. This workshop will share very concrete open source AI digital public service examples from 3 countries. It is my hope that the discussions here will be an opportunity to identify the areas we should focus on in our role as capacity builders and enablers for open source, AI, and digital public goods and services. I commit to you here now that we will collaborate and work with you and support you on your journey to transform digital public services for a better tomorrow. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tsavatsava, for your opening remarks and also for stressing and highlighting the potential that open source AI can play in improving public services if used responsibly, if used in partnerships. Thank you so much. All right. We've got a whole range of sessions still coming up, and thank you for everyone who's still coming in and who's finding the way into our workshop room. The next session that we're going to look at is how and what AI for public service delivery can actually look like in practice. And to do that, we have 3 brief presentations that will actually look at live demonstrations of use cases from Kenya, from Kazakhstan, and also from India. The session is moderated by David Morset, who's the coordinator of ITU's and UNDP's Open Source Ecosystem Enabler project, which Dr. Tsavatsava also just mentioned, and it is funded by the European Union. In a nutshell, OC supports countries in developing impactful digital public goods. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So I would like to welcome to the stage our participants such that we can initiate the session. So I would like to have Bayan Casanova, project manager at the National Information Technologies in Kazakhstan. Christian Mertz, program lead at GIZ, please welcome. Howard Lacuna, senior project program manager at digital technology from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we'll have online Brian Omwenga, team lead at Think, the Tech Innovators Network. So welcome to you and to our session. So ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this session on AI for public services and delivery in action. So today we are here to explore the transformative potential of open source artificial intelligence in enhancing public services, showcasing how innovative technologies can make government operations more efficient, transparent, and responsive to the needs of citizens. We'll receive 3 presentations and demonstrations from 3 different countries. First, from Kenya, we'll see a demonstration of a chatbot developed for the Office of the Data Protection Officer. It's an AI-driven solution that was designed to assist citizens in understanding their data privacy rights and navigating the complexities of data protection laws, ensuring a higher level of transparency and trust between the government and the public, which is key to the trust overall in government services. Next, we'll shift our focus to Kazakhstan, where an AI platform has been developed to transform the way government and citizens interact. So we'll be showing the platform leveraging AI to streamline various public services, making them more accessible, more user-friendly, and thereby fostering a more engaged and informed citizenry. Finally, we'll explore the agricultural information exchange platform, AIEP, a collaborative effort between India and Kenya. This platform uses AI to provide critical agricultural information to farmers, enhancing productivity and sustainability in the agricultural sector, which is vital for the economic well-being of both nations. Each of these use cases exemplifies the power of AI in addressing unique challenges and improving public services delivery. So without further waiting, let us begin this session with the first presentation from India with Christian Mertz from GIZ and Howard Lacuna from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So to give us a nice overview of their ongoing developments. Christian, the floor is yours. And I may ask Daniel if you could facilitate the projection of presentations.
Is it working? Okay. Yep. Yeah. Great. And if it's okay with you, I'm standing up, since then I can have a better overview on the slides. So good morning also from my side. My name is Christian Merz, Program Lead of Fair Forward at GIZ, together with Howard Lacuna from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm doing this presentation on behalf of the foundation, as well as on behalf of the Fair Forward program, which is also supported by the German government. I don't know whether my entertainment skills are good enough to keep you awake this morning, but it's good to see that all of you showed up early this morning. And I know that Howard joins me then on the Q&A, and he has much better entertainment skills than me. So hopefully we will have a good discussion. But beforehand, maybe I will spend 8 to 10 minutes to introduce the so-called Agricultural Information Exchange Platform, which is a 2-year program that has been conceptualized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and now supported for 2 years in partnership with GIZ and Clear Global, together with so-called 4 cohorts that are developing minimum viable products of this platform. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the smallholder farming space, let's spend a minute on the problem statement. Basically, we're looking into smallholder farming systems in countries like Kenya and federal states like Bihar and India, where we lack sufficient productivity and where we have a stagnating profitability on a smallholder farmer level. And that has different reasons. One of the most important reasons, or most relevant reasons, is that smallholder farmers need to know what to do, and they need to get timely advice and information. And that is usually addressed by public extension services. So that is a public service where basically the target group is the large group of smallholder farmers. That is a major backbone for those economies. And therefore, it is very important that this kind of public service is efficient and of good quality. But I think there are certain challenges. The numbers displayed here are from Bihar and India, but are also similar in other countries. I think cost efficiency is one major issue. Per adopted practice, we have currently between $16 and $35 of costs. That is by far not good enough to have a scalable reach, as well as having a human-faced public service delivery by extension workers who have to serve between 500 and up to 5,000 farmers. You can imagine that this is not scalable and that the quality of service is quite limited. In terms of the digital utilization, we have seen a major increase of digital solutions in low and middle income countries. I think there are more than 1,000 now registered, and most of them are focusing on advisory and extension services. But that is not sufficiently reaching the farmers. Less than 50% in Bihar receive any advisory information service at all. So I think those are the challenges we are facing. And I'm not sure whether it's working still. Okay. So I think it's fair to say that digital advisory solutions have not been effective at providing farmers with the right information at the right time, so the information they require. And that is basically to the low adoption of digital tools, but also we have an incompatible and fragmented digital service landscape, as well as on the literacy and digital literacy level limitations on the side of the farmers. So I think what we're looking at is the following what-if scenario. We want to basically make use of recent advancements in technology, including generative AI, to offer high quality, personalized and dynamic information in the preferred languages on the preferred channel that farmers usually prefer. And we're addressing mainly women farmers. So the user story that we're looking at is that we have a women farmer who asks a question or asks for advice in her local language, utilizing a conversational interface on her feature or smartphone, and then get the answer in natural language in her local dialect accordingly, promptly. And as the system is being used, it learns from the interaction with the user and gets more and more personalized. So the context of each individual farmer will be recognized sufficiently over time. And the information provided stems basically from different data sources. So we try to be agnostic of the underlying repository and data source, and have certain organizations that can help to have that interoperability on the data and content layer. So the concept that we're looking at is basically 4-layered. We have a data and content module. We have a module to curate and exchange information, and then to personalize and also have a two-way communication with the end user. And then on the user interfacing side, have an omni-channel approach with certain adoption of various channels. And I think the key success factor is really how far we will be able to automate the information exchange. That is really the key issue to be scalable. And if the generative AI technology works well, we have basically an unlimited scale that we can make use of because it's fully automated, but still not compromising on the timeliness, the relevance, and the actionability of the information. The cherry on top is then to have a common architecture with components that are reusable between the implementations of that platform. And we are following very much an open approach. So we're favoring digital public goods. We have a few candidates within that architectural approach that are predestined for open modules. Some will remain proprietary. So it will be a mix according to the digital public infrastructure approach. But we favor very much open modules, and we have a few examples for that for the discussion. So those are the 4 cohorts called DINAC, mainly made up of CGIAR organizations and partners. We have Digital Green and partners, Viamo and partners, and Tech4Her made up of DEHAT and Dalberg. They are focusing on different value chains and the regions in India and Bihar and Kenya, and cover according to their core business different channels. So IVR, for instance, is one of the favorite channels where Viamo has a lot of experience, whereas Digital Green is very good in social media, Telegram, WhatsApp, and also app integration. And all of them are basically using natural language processing technologies, be it automated speech recognition, machine translation, or text-to-speech, to also provide information in local languages, but also make use of large language models. And one candidate, for instance, for an open module is the retrieval augmented generation pipeline that we're going to use. All of them are looking into prompting large language models with contextual information that are stemming from local repositories utilizing a RAG pipeline. And that is also something where we collaborate with another project funded by BMGF, which is the Generative AI in Agriculture program. So with that, I would like to jump into 2 quick demos of 1 minute, just to give you an impression. I don't know, Daniel, maybe we can start with Digital Green, or yeah, I think it's 038 where we want to start. No problem. So that gives you, yeah. That is basically showcasing what they call the farmer chat. So it's a bot integrated in Telegram and WhatsApp so far, who is able to provide advisory in text, but also in speech. So
data, content, and bot platform. Let's dive into the key features and metrics of our platform. Welcome to Digital Green's platform. Let's dive into the key features and metrics of our platform. Currently, we have over 7,000 registered users, with a 36% monthly and 13% weekly active user rate. Our ongoing efforts focus on improving the onboarding process to enhance user experience. The bot has processed over 180,000 queries, offering insights into the diverse agricultural challenges faced by users. We've seen a noticeable improvement in response success rates thanks to continual enhancements in our content knowledge base and better interaction techniques. User feedback has been predominantly positive, with most users appreciating the detailed and helpful responses. We continuously refine our content based on this feedback, especially focusing on underperforming areas to ensure all agricultural queries are addressed effectively. Now, let's proceed to a demonstration to see how the bot functions in real time. Users start by selecting their preferred language and crop type. For our demonstration, we're focusing on potatoes. If you encounter a problem like yellowing potato leaves, simply ask, "What should I do if the potato that I've planted has leaves turning yellow?" The bot provides detailed advice, exploring potential issues such as nutrient deficiencies or infections, and suggests practical follow-up questions to help diagnose and resolve the problem accurately. This live demo showcases the bot's capability for both text and voice interactions, accommodating user preferences for reading or listening. Integrated feedback mechanisms allow users to rate responses and contribute to the bot's continuous improvement. Moving on to FarmStack.
I think you can stop here.
Facilitates
So that is the one example from Digital Green, quite advanced, and they are also very good in integrating that chatbot into an existing portfolio that they are already using, like FarmStack, which is a data exchange open protocol for integrating different data sources from different sources. The last one is on Viamo. Another example, they are using IVR, interactive voice response. In this case, it's an example of end-user interaction in India that allows for local language voice interaction. I hope it will work. No, it's 4:44, 4 minutes 44.
A sample here from a farmer testing this out in India. The video is a little bit long, so I suspect our GIZ colleagues may pause the video before the end of the full recording, but there is a transcription here on the right that you can have a read of whilst you're watching a demonstration of one of the farmers interacting with the voice-based assistant. So with that, I'll close and thank you very much.
क्या बोल रहा है? स्पीकर ऑन कीजिए. लग गया ना?
So she's using her feature phone, obviously, in local language to get advice on wheat crop disease management.
प्रश्न पूछिए. गेहूं का खेती कैसे करें? एक दबाइए.
But I think we can stop here now. So I think that gives you an impression where we are really providing low-tech channel compatibility with local language interfacing. And we engaging very much with end users. Each monthly sprint that we check progress with our cohorts is supplemented by end user interaction. So I think we came quite far so far, but there are still challenges that we're facing, and we're happy to discuss. So I will stop here. I don't know, Howard, whether you want to provide anything on top or whether we jump directly in Q&A. We don't have more slides, but if you want to add anything that I may have missed or any.
I think you did a good job covering it. We can go straight to questions if there's any.
All right. I see the second mic is working. Perfect. Question. I didn't see who raised their hand first, so I'm just going to give it to the lady over here. Maybe just introduce yourself by name and who brings you here, what brings you here, and then your question.
Good morning, and thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Riham. I'm representing the government of Egypt. My question goes here. Can you elaborate a little bit about the adaptability? I think farmers are not that much sophisticated users of IT, and so how hard was it to train them, or that you can guarantee that they can use the application very well?
Thank you. And should we collect one or two questions, or do you want to answer first? Okay.
Sure, I can start. Perhaps you can complement. Thank you so much for your questions. Farmers' adaptability was actually the primary reason why we decided to do this project. Like Christian mentioned, what we found is of the hundreds, if not thousands, of farmer advisory tools that have been deployed, farmers don't use them. Part of the reason is because farmers are not a monolith. They own multiple types of devices, and a lot of tools that currently exist only work on one device. So we knew that they did not reach the farmers. So we wanted to help develop a device or a solutions that can be used by farmers on the device that they already own, as opposed to a device that we are designing the interface for. So whether a farmer prefer using a radio or a feature phone that they already have, or a smartphones, this solution should work for them. So that is one way that we approach farmer adaptability. And the second way is contextualize localized information. If I'm a farmer somewhere in Egypt or a farmer in Cameroon, which is where I'm from, and I have my local farm in my village, and I ask a question to my device, and it gives me information about the whole district or the whole country, that may not be usable for me. So we thought that that was another barriers of farmers' adaptability. I don't know if I miss anything.
Not really. Maybe just to add is that we really want to combine contextual farmer profiles with generative models, but both of them on its own do not work to provide really the localized information they require. And I think that is really key for the adoption. If we don't make it, and here we make progress. I think we are at a level, for instance, with Tech for Her, where they have seen a rate of 6% of unsuccessful messages, which is really good, I think. Otherwise, they had quite some good feedback on the relevance and the contextualization of their information.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Christian. I'm looking at David. Do we have time for another question? One last. I think there were a few over here. Okay, let's maybe just take 3 very quick questions. I will give it to the gentleman here first.
You're very generous, thank you. My name is Peter Bruck. I'm the chairperson of the World Summit Awards, and we are for the last 21 years in the VISIS process looking at best practices in social impact solutions. I found it very interesting what you were showing also in terms of the language exchange. And one of it obviously is the question of local languages. But the other one is, how do you simplify the texts? So we have developed text simplification technologies, which are basically breaking down the lingo of the expert into something which is more intelligible, more understandable, and more applicable to people. So it's the pragmatics which you want to look at, not just the semantics or let's say the syntactics and whatever. So my question is, have you thought about using text simplification, and in which way did it work in a various different kind of context? And the last thing which I would be interested, just to mention it, Telangana State in India has a huge program of outreach for farmers where they are actually doing very, very similar things what you're describing in Bihar. So that's something which I would like to reference later on. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Okay, can I come to you? I think there was a hand over there. I feel like I'm a bit biased towards this side. So if there was one over there, no, then there was a lady, I think, okay.
Hi, I work for the city of Amsterdam, and we did also some pilots with AI for public services, but in some cases at the end I was quite shocked by the prices that we would have to pay if we really wanted to implement it. And especially I think when you work with very, very small local languages, it may be very expensive, and I wonder whether you run into that problem as well, or whether you do not have that.
Thank you. And I think open source can help with that, maybe. One very brief third one. I think you raised your hand first, yes.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I'm Wen Yu from the Victorian Government in Australia, working on social impact and evidence-based investing. So I've got a really quick question just around, so farmers are likely to rely on the advice from the chatbot to make some very important decisions for their livelihood. So I was wondering around the accuracy of the information provided and sort of validation mechanisms that you've used. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll hand it over to whoever would like to start.
Yeah, I try to be very brief and maybe start from backwards. Yeah, the quality of information is really a key issue, and we have that reinforced learning mechanisms built in, like you have seen this green. There are some feedback mechanisms, how useful was the information, and then learn from that. So I think, as I've mentioned, we're not perfect, and we definitely need to improve, and that goes hand in hand with the language being used. And like with the other question, do we really provide the information in the right format that is understandable? So that all goes hand in hand, and I think that's where we still need to work upon. But we so far, initially, at least with some of the MVPs, we have quite satisfactory results. They are not all equal. Some are in a more advanced stage, but they're learning from each other, and that's what we're trying to collaborate upon on common issues like local language data collection, which makes it then more cost efficient and sustainable over time. So the question on how much to invest is really also a key issue. I think for the moment, it's definitely a donor space where we need donor investments, and then see to what extent do we gain interest from governments. Finally, we need governments to invest in that. And in India, for instance, we also in contact with national initiatives like Vistar and others who had an overlapping approach, and that could provide a scaling mechanism and also investments from the government side. Last but not least, on the language being used and information simplification, I think here it's really key to provide the capabilities and combine the capabilities of large language models, utilizing the generative capabilities with local and contextualized agriculture information for the prompt that you're using. So I really believe in the RAG approach, where we combine local databases of agricultural knowledge to provide a better prompt for getting a better answer, right? And for this, we also by far not there yet, but with the CG system, for instance, and their digital initiatives, we have already ambitious approaches where we have research insights, where we have textual and unstructured information to utilize for that prompt engineering and then make it a better outcome.
Thanks, Christian. And thanks for your presentation. quickly head over here to switch to the next one, but would hand over to David to introduce the next one.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this insightful presentation and demonstration. Now I would like to turn our attention to Brian Omwenga and Fink with the chatbot development for the Office for Data Protection Officer. Brian, can you hear us? Brian is online.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good morning, Brian. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. See if I can locate the presentation. Please let me know if you can see the presentation.
Yeah, it's coming up. It says that your screen is shared, so...
Okay, just hold on 1 second, because I think I had... Okay. All right. So let me know if you can see the presentation now.
Yeah, we can see your presentation now.
All right, good. I'll possibly keep it in this mode, because if I go full screen, I might not be able to see the slides as I present them. So I'd just like to introduce ourselves. We are a local AI startup, the Tech Innovators Network, which we shorten as THINK. And we primarily try and build AI-fast solutions so that we basically take an approach of the community, and we want to create technology collaborative solutions. We did a project for the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, the ODPC. This was last year. This is the second of three chatbots that we have developed for the government of Kenya. And the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner presented a fairly interesting challenge and request, simply because one of the clear mandates that the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner has is civic education. They basically have to educate the public about data privacy, and it's a tall task, and the amount of manpower they have could possibly not do it. So that's why they thought about having a chatbot to do the same. But then also beyond that, there are very interesting and unique challenges. Maybe some of you might have read about an organization called WorldCoin, Humanity for Good, that were involved in some data collection. They were taking retina photos of citizens within Kenya, and it really became an extremely a big deal that was even discussed up to and including Parliament. So it is very clear the challenge that the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner has with respect to civic education and raising privacy awareness. And we were very happy to do this project for them and assist them in that regard. So generally, that is a summary of why we started and why we did the chatbot project. It's an AI chatbot that leverages natural language processing and machine learning, so as to have basically conversational interactions with citizens. We built the chatbot primarily in English and Swahili, but we also included a colloquial type of English Swahili mixture spoken on the streets called Shem. So just a very quick overview of the chatbot itself. We were driven by these 5 particular features. So we were challenged to make sure that the chatbot can be integrated into various communication channels, which we will demonstrate. We also built an analytics dashboard. The analytics dashboard basically helps us understand what's going on within the chatbot and how areas of improvement and basically very useful analytics information. We built an annotation dashboard, and the interesting bit about the annotation tool is that we eventually had to build the annotation tool ourselves. And this is one of the challenges we experienced by basing ourselves on an open source architecture. But we can discuss that a little bit deeper. And then, of course, we included some multilingual support. So this is also not necessarily open source, but it's something we had to build. And then everything else, of course, was driven by open source tools. So just very quickly to walk you through these features. So on the communication channels, we have a web channel, which is, we actually coded a web page that manages the charts. And then we have a web widget, which we then provided to the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, and it's embedded on various pages and various online services that the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner has. And in addition to that, we also were able to integrate it to various social media platforms that they had. So the primary goal was one of availability, interactive design, personalized experience, and easy integration or integration into third-party services. I might do a demo of this, but I took screenshots of the same so that you can at least appreciate that. You'll see on the web widget, it's just a small widget that is loaded as an iframe on the websites or any other services that the ODPC offered. On the next slide, you'll see the custom web chat interface that we built. So this is just slightly bigger, and it just offers a much bigger interaction. And then this is an example of the Telegram bot channel interaction that we built. The analytics dashboard was driven by Metaverse. So that is that's the platform that we used. And the goals for the analytics dashboard, of course, driven through a process of development, was to have good data visualization, check on performance indicators that we had developed through a logic diagram, and then, of course, use this data in analytics for continuous improvement. More detailed as to how we actually built the analytics dashboard is on this slide. I think I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but we also primarily were following the success of the language and just how accurate the chatbot was inferring and understanding a lot of the questions that were received. A sample of the analytics dashboard, you can see there. We were able to track number of daily conversations and any other amount of matrices that we felt were useful for the admin team, and that we also felt were useful for the ODPC office. In addition to that, the one other challenge, at least that we experienced, was that the RASA annotation tool, for some reason, was not supported beyond, I think, beyond last year when the RASA versions were updated. And therefore, we found ourselves with a really serious problem in terms of continuing to train the bot. So we actually built our own custom annotation tool. We just pull the data straight out of Raza, and then we create the training file that we then push back into the bot during the off-peak times. And we also will gladly probably include this into an architecture that can be used for future bots around the area. So the goal for the annotation tool, of course, is data annotation, data enrichment. And then we build the annotation tool such that we can get multiple users to actually look at the interactions of the bot and create the necessary annotations. So the technicalities about the build for the annotation tool are basically that mainly we looked at pulling out the data. Ideally, it's just to improve the accuracy rate of the bot in terms of its inference and its natural language understanding cycle. So I'll probably not also go deep into this, but just show you a sample of the annotation interfaces that we had. So we could pull data out of the bot, thankfully, because it was open source. And then we could actually create annotations, match them with intents, and create the annotation file that could then be used for training back into the bot during the off-peak hours, primarily during Friday night, when we felt that the bot wasn't used too much. Other interesting features that we had to build on top of the chatbot, well, the open source rather framework, were multilingual features. So we built a series of models, language models, a language classifier model. We just call that generally as a language classifier model. But ideally, we needed to create models that could understand Kiswahili. And we came across some specific interesting problems. For instance, the problem of language-specific tokenization. So in Kiswahili, it's very difficult to tokenize certain words because certain words are complete sentences in themselves. So depending on where you actually splice the word, you can actually have absolutely and complete different understanding of or a different inference of the word that is given to you. So we then had to build a custom tokenizer and rule-based tokenization, particularly for the handling of Kiswahili. Another challenge that we had was the issue of enhanced word embeddings. So some of the pre-trained words could not capture some of the nuances of Swahili semantics. So there are issues such as intonation that can give a word absolutely different meaning. So for this, what we actually did is we then had to more or less build a language model based on collecting local language, actual local language, and having the locals actually contribute to this. And what we leveraged on was an open data set by Mozilla. And then, of course, we trained based on that. So we also contributed quite a bit back into the Mozilla Common Voice corpus. Thankfully, through the support of GIZ, I think I should mention that as well. And then finally, of course, there was intent classification, also a challenge that you realize when you actually change languages as well, and to have the bot actually do the same. So this is, so I'll just zoom through this. The final bit, of course, is the issue of the knowledge base, which we therefore think is something very useful in two dimensions. So there's a knowledge base for language, which is now a domain-specific knowledge base that we feel can still be built and should still be built, and we continue contributing to it. We're also aware of another knowledge base project called the Ken Corpus that we've also leveraged quite a bit with regard to this. And then, of course, to also build very domain-specific language, particularly around government. I think someone had mentioned a question about text simplification. So a lot of government documents also tend to have a lot of legalese, but it then becomes very difficult for citizens to understand. So that's why we also feel that it is useful to build a lot of these knowledge bases that can also be used to simplify a lot of government speak. Then I think that's in conclusion. I think the major lessons that we received through this project is there are certain challenges around open source, and especially some of the challenges we realize around RASA is some modules stop being supported for some reason, or the community is not really active around building the same. So we had to build quite a number of the modules back up by ourselves. So there's certain advantages and disadvantages, therefore, of such open architecture. The other challenge, of course, is we took a HCD approach, a human-centered design approach. So most of our content was driven by users, but there's a clear challenge of stakeholder mobilization. Sometimes it might be easy to just go the generative route and just collect all the data and then do something generative around it. But because we're doing a domain-specific driven chatbot, we had to deal directly with individuals within the data protection office whose availability was a bit difficult, as well as deal with a lot of lawyers and individuals who are stakeholders who interact with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. So we think that can also be quite a challenge in terms of building safe and responsible AI, but it is going to be quite heavy in terms of actually getting there and reaching the ultimate goal. But the inclusiveness we found to be very, very good. And the solution also gets a bit more acceptance because a lot of the individuals were included. I think that's it. The chatbot can be found at that link. So this is the custom web, but if you do go to the, so this is the widget.
Thank you very much, Brian. That was very interesting. We can have one or two quick questions and then move to the last talk.
Sure.
All right. Any questions? All right.
My name is Peter Brook from the World Summit Awards, and I want to congratulate you on this just absolutely brilliant presentation. I've heard a lot of people talking about how they did conversational chatbots, and I think you did a splendid job just presenting it and also on the work you have done. What I'm really interested in is the domain-specific work you're doing, because there's, for instance, in Tanzania, there's a similar initiative regarding legal language and making it available to rural areas. Are you having any kind of intentions to use your chatbot also in other Eastern African countries? And in which way do you have a network to, basically adopt it and deploy it in other countries? Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe just a note to Brian, if you stop sharing your screen, we can also see your face if you'd like to show it. Okay, perfect. Oh, no, because I'm talking now, we see ourselves. But anyway, you'll be talking just now. Is there any other question? The gentleman over there.
Thanks. Sorry, my name is Phil Outram. I work with the UK government Yeah, great presentation. Thank you very much. My question's I'm really interested in language and particularly, adopting tools that we see as available in English and just assume, great, we've got these amazing tools, let's use them across Africa, etc. And so it was really interesting you touching on the vector embedding. And I guess my question is, it seemed like, I can well imagine, we have great tools, models for English, not so much for Swahili. And obviously there are two approaches, because I guess you could translate from Swahili into English and then use the English and the vector embedding, or you could get vector embedding in Swahili, if I've sort of understood correctly. And I guess, is one of those approaches better than the other? Is one of them good enough, or did you feel you had to go down a particular route? Thank you.
All right.
Over to you, Brian.
All right, good. For the second question, on the call, I also have Nick Mumero. He's our lead on he's our NLP engineer lead. So he can add to my response to the second question. So I'll start with the first one from Peter. First and foremost, thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words. I will say that what we are trying to do, this is now from a startup perspective, is actually create a community of practice, and within this community of practice, we then push a lot of our collaborative solutions through the same. So we do have a mechanism to try and reach out to other people and share our solutions. We've actually been also moving around local universities. So at the beginning of this year, we actually went to about three different universities across the country to just speak about these tools that we can share, because I believe the building of this and the supporting of a lot of these open technology stacks will require community, will actually require community engagement. So definitely very happy that you've informed us about the initiative in Tanzania. I probably also will just request if you could share more information. We can try and reach out with them to them and then see how we can collaborate to actually build a good technology sharing stack as well. On the language embeddings, I think this one maybe Nick, you can prepare yourself to come through. But one thing I'll just mention very interestingly, which you have brought up, whenever we talk about responsible and inclusive AI, one thing that, especially on the language front, that we've realized is that it has a very, very different meaning between, let's say, for instance, the United Kingdom, where inclusive would actually mean that, you have very good English language, which has been annotated and has data sets from the 50s. But when you come into an Africa setting, as the previous presenters actually also made very clear, inclusive has a very different meaning. And inclusive simply means you probably have to have a solution with over 60 languages, and that just introduces a level of complexity. Very good technical complexity, because it's now fairly good stuff to work on technically. So it's a good challenge. And one of the challenges is the questions that you've asked, in terms of the vector embeddings. So maybe Nick, you could jump in if you hear the question and just state which of the two preferences you felt were useful in creating the embeddings.
Sure. Okay. Hi everyone. So unfortunately, I won't show my video. My video isn't working, but I think I can still go ahead and answer the question. So when this project started, generative AI wasn't at a level where we would have done like retrieval augmented generation applications, like the one from the presentation we've just had before Brian. And when it did, it wasn't still financially viable since it was so expensive. So when we were doing this project, we were still using the legacy method of building chatbots. So where you have natural language understanding, but not natural language generation. So for natural language understanding, that's why we had to create classification models. So these classification models were one separate, one for English and one for Swahili, combined with Shem. And for context, I mean, for these models to understand context, that's where we're using text embeddings. And when you're doing text embeddings, it's for better accuracy, it's better for better accuracy, especially on a low resource language or in a language that doesn't have that much data. It's just best for you to build a small language model just so that you can generate the text embeddings. One of these approaches is by using something like what VEC, bag of words, if you're aware of them. And with that, you're able to create text embeddings that are very domain specific, that also have very high accuracy levels. So to your question, domain specific text embeddings without having to translate language was our approach. So I'd say it was mostly because we chose it as a result of not having any other better option. But it was actually text embedding was just one of those models. So we had other models that we were using also for classification to get to. It was an ensemble of models. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Nick, for geeking out on us. But thank you very much. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Brian and colleagues, for this truly inspiring presentation and amazing developments. Now let's turn our attention to Kazakhstan's AI platform for government and citizens. So I would like to welcome Bayan to give us this presentation.
Hello to everyone. We have run out of time. I will try to be very, very quick and concentrate on the main things only. Can you? Yes, thank you. My name is Bayan Hasenova. I'm representing Kazakhstan. Thank you for the ITU for inviting me to show what our country has done in terms of AI on the governmental level. I'm from NITEC, National Information Technologies. We are national operators of the electronic government of our country. Apart from that, we are also operators of data and AI platform. In terms of the global recognition, we have been awarded 2 prizes this year. First place in the World Government Summit in Dubai, and the other one, we have been included in the top 3 of Future of Government Awards. In terms of the rankings, we are number 8 in the world in terms of providing online public services. Next slide, please. I would like to introduce you what we are doing in terms of AI. We have decided that we will create the platform that will work as a marketplace for state bodies, maybe businesses, and AI developers in one place. From one hand, we will have the role of the customer. The customer can be any state body with their needs in terms of the AI products. And from the other side, we will allow AI developers, independent AI startups to come to the platform and create that AI models. And our role will be as an operator of the platform to provide the infrastructure of supercomputer and the real data for the AI developers to create that AI models. So we have decided that we need to give the equal rights to both to the big tech companies in the country and to independent AI developers in order to show their talents and have the same resources, data and infrastructure. And next slide, please. So the 4 main pillars of the platform is the infrastructure. We will have all that AI models and products in one place. We will have the regulatory legal acts in one place as well, because we will centralize all AI developments in one place. And of course, information security will be monitored via our digital ministry, and all the AI developers will have the accreditation via the ministry. Next slide. The advantages of the platform will be very, very obvious. We will centralize everything in one place. We are still in negotiation stage whether we will allow banks and private sector to have an access to the platform. So the banks, if they have an access, they will have the real data that will help them to make the accurate scoring. The quasi-state will have, it will be cheaper for them to be on the platform rather than develop their own AI products separately. Businesses as well, state bodies will have an access to put any of their needs, and universities will have basis for research. Next slide. We are also building our Kazakhstan large language model. We have already downloaded several sources for that. For example, from the Supreme Court and for Justice, all police records, agriculture, science and education, culture, movies, music, economy, healthcare, ecology and industry, and many others. And well, all that will require a lot of specialists in AI. That is why we have promoted the vouchers via different independent IT schools and via free universities. So we have already implemented the faculties of AI, and the first version of our LLM will be ready by the end of this year. So let's dive into the use cases that we have already implemented. We're not only the operators of the platform, we also decided that we need to make our own AI models. So I'm presenting you the first chat that we have integrated, eGov AI for citizens. That will work. It will be free. It will be a navigator for citizens to get the public services in more easier manner. So the citizens can ask the chat whether they can have any of the public service, and the chat will proactively share the link where they can have that public service. For example, how to renew their driving license and so on. Next slide. As I told you, in the Kazakh LLM, we have downloaded all our legal acts, all our laws. So we decided to provide that information to citizens as well for free. And we call that chat Kazakh Law, where our citizens can have legal assistance for any their needs. For example, if they've been caught by the policeman and the policeman said that they need to pay any fines, they can go to the chat and verify that information, or any other legal issues that we'll have. Next slide. From the other hand, for the use of the laws and legal acts, we have created Adalet and Judge chat that will help the civil servants responsible for lawmaking or law changing to create new laws. So it's not easier to actually create a new law. It always takes a process of changing other laws as well. So that process is actually done manually, but with the integration with the chat, that civil servants will make it faster because the chat will proactively show the other issues and other laws to be changed in order to implement a new law. And the last chat, Daniker. So this is the most powerful tool that our government will have. It already works, but it's not open to the public. But we are testing it right now in order to provide it to the government. So as we are data operators, we have all the information about our citizens. We have implemented Daniker for the government, for the more effective actions to be taken in order to rule the country. For example, if the government wants to know how many families are in crisis situation currently in the country, we can ask the chat, tell me the exact number of those families, where do they live, how many of them, and how the exact amount of money to be invested to help them to provide the state support. Or for example, please identify the families who don't have the houses, and calculate the number of apartments to be built and the total number of investments to be taken into this action. So this was an overview what we have done. It's not everything that we are doing. This is a limited information that I can share right now, and I hope I will have a chance to talk more about it later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bayan. This is really interesting, and I know Kazakhstan is really well advanced into open source developments, and I can see that AI is under your radar right now. Are there any questions from the audience?
See one over there.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Leah Gimpel from the Digital Public Goods Alliance. Thank you so much for sharing all that you've done. I think it's quite impressive, just the number of projects that you're implementing. I've one short question, and that pertains to the open source part. Can you elaborate a bit more on which aspects of the systems that you shared are open source and your experience using open source in AI development?
Thank you for the question. It's a very, very good question. We are actually relying only on open source solutions, and the developers of ours who are doing AI, they shared that they are concentrating only on open source because it's cheaper. We don't need to pay any licenses, any fees. That is why it's a good option to build our AI platform.
Thanks, Bayan. Any other question? Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Valeria. I come from Peru. I am curious about the strategies to create awareness in the population to get to know all of these AI projects and chatbots that they can use to get real information from the government.
Thank you. We haven't actually officially declared it to our public, to our citizens. We are planning to do so maybe later this summer or in the fall. And it will be done via the media, or there's some important events in our country.
Hi, thank you. Really interesting that you're going down the open source route. So quick question, do you have a sense of how much infrastructure that the government has needed to put in place to be able to host and develop your LLM and that sort of thing? Like how many GPUs, that sort of thing? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very political question. And this is the struggle that I shared with the US representative of the government who is here right now. Yes, we have calculated the amount of the resources that we need in order to build everything. We're still in the process of purchasing all the GPUs, and I hope that by the end of this year, we will manage to do that and to release all our projects. They are working actually, but we still need more resources to operate more efficiently.
Sure, these announcements are very loud. Okay, thanks for the questions. I would hand over, David, back to you.
Yep, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Bayan. I would like to thank all presenters for sharing these remarkable innovations. These demonstrations of public services using open source AI have highlighted how powerful this tool can and are and can enhance public service delivery and making government operations more efficient and citizen-centric. So now let's continue to explore and embrace these technologies to build a better future for all. With the following session deep diving into the actual state of the art in large language models and fine-tuning approaches to make AI more accessible, more inclusive, and less costly to countries struggling with scarce resources. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm welcoming the next session.
All right. Thanks again to all the presentations, and it's good to see what AI can actually look like in practice in public service delivery. We've seen these three examples, and now with the next session, as you can already see on the screens, we're actually going to look at one of the buzzwords at the moment, which is generative AI, and what role that can play. And I mean, as we all know, the pace and innovation in this regard is quite staggering. There's a lot of possibilities that generative AI, that LLMs, which we talked about quite a bit earlier, and other tools like that have, but there's also, of course, risks in terms of accuracy, in terms of transparency, and so on. And to further explore what role and what use generative AI can play in public services, the OSI, the Open Source Ecosystem Enabler Project, has actually teamed up with Zindi, and which is a platform for machine learning competitions, and the AI for Good team, so the organizers of this conference. And together they organized a hackathon to bring this question of generative AI and public service delivery to the global community. And in this upcoming session, you'll hear about the outcomes of the hackathon. You'll also learn a little bit more about LLMs, large language models, and this ominous acronym called RAG. In case you don't know what it is, you'll hear much more about it. The session is co-moderated by our dear Bayan Khasinova, who you just heard, as well as Roman Chesnov, who's Digital Services Project Officer at the ITU, and who very much hopes that his laptop won't crash when he does the presentation of LLMs and RAG just now. So welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I believe I can actually start by passing the word to Paul, who will talk a little bit about Zindi, which is the platform where ITU had the opportunity to host a challenge, a community challenge that was dedicated to development of open source RAG, and it was a pleasure to collaborate. I really hope that this was the first, but definitely not the last project for our team to work on together with Zindi. So perhaps, Paul, you could tell a few words about what Zindi does and what are Zindi's perspectives on open source, artificial intelligence, and its role in the public sector in general.
Okay. There's a clicker somewhere? Or are you going to be the clicker?
Have something somewhere. Okay.
Do you have a clicker?
I'm not sure if I downloaded this presentation.
I can just set my laptop up if it's easier. Okay, while we wait, I'll say hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you to the ITU and to Roman and his team. Also really nice to hear from GIZ and hear a little bit about the digital green work. We've done some work, I won't talk about it today, but we were involved a little bit with digital green as well. And GIZ have been very long-standing and very loyal partners to Zindi. We've had a lot of GIZ challenges on the platform, so nice to hear a bit from you as well.
Almost there.
No pressure.
And apologies on my behalf because I actually missed downloading Paul's presentation.
I actually don't have the screen sharing permissions. This will be.
Great. Okay, so yeah, this is me. I'm going to talk a little bit about Zindi, a little bit about our partnership with ITU, and touch briefly on the AI intuition challenge itself. You can go. So I like to introduce Zindi by example or by stories. So I want to tell you a little bit about the DeepMind Turtle Recall Conservation Challenge that we ran on Zindi in partnership with Google DeepMind. It's a great example of a challenge that we ran on the platform that had the idea of open sourcing its models afterwards. I'll talk a little bit more about our philosophy on open sourcing models and so on. But for now, let me just start with this example. Google DeepMind partnered with us because they were interested in supporting AI and machine learning development on the continent. And they wanted to do something in conservation. So we found a partner, somebody that we'd worked with for a long time in Kenya who works on turtle conservation. They had a trouble with identifying turtles. Turtles are keystone marine species, so it's very important to track them and know what they're doing in an ecosystem. Generally speaking, up until very recently, turtle tracking has involved heavy metal tags that goes either around a fin or attaches directly to the shell. It can cause health problems for turtles. They can fall off. There are a lot of problems. So one of the things that this NGO in Kenya was doing was taking photos of every turtle that they collected. It was a partnership with fishermen, and if the turtles were caught accidentally, they were photographed and then released, and they were keeping a database of this to try and track turtle populations. So we had this great database of turtle faces, and so we ran a facial recognition challenge. So the idea was, can you build a computer vision model that can recognize a turtle's face from a photo of it? And so we have now a database of thousands of turtles, and now we can recognize faces. Next slide. So the outcome were so maybe just to tell you a little bit about how Zindi works. We posted this challenge to our users. We have quite an extensive platform of users. It's a free to use platform. The challenge was posted. There was a $10,000 prize pool, and we share the data set. Users are invited to download the data set, build models, submit their models to Zindi. Those models get scored automatically on our platform, and then the winning models, it's up to the presenters of the challenge, in this case Google DeepMind, what happens with those models. So many of our models, the organizers want the models to be open sourced afterwards, so the winners get prize money and the models are made open to the community. This was the outcome. There's a blog post about it on DeepMind's website if you'd like to read more about it. The models are published and public on our GitHub. And then the models also went into production with the conservation agency. So they're currently using these models. So this is a This is a kind of illustration of how you can crowdsource innovation in an open way. Next slide. So Zindi is currently a network of more than 70,000 users. We're focused on Africa. Something like 60% of our users are in Africa, but we have representation in basically every country in the world. We've given away that number's a bit out of date. It's closer to $700,000 in prizes over the last 5 years. That's again mostly to African prize winners, African data scientists, often people who've taught themselves how to code and how to build models. And this has taken place through more than 300 competitions. Next slide, please. So our community is really at the heart of what we do, and we have 3 major reasons why people choose to join Zindi. Those are the challenges, as I've already discussed, learning, both formal and informal. Up until this point, learning on Zindi has been a practical experience. These challenges allow people a way to apply skills they might have learned in a boot camp or a workshop, sometimes from university, but most of our users are not learning these skills at university. This is one of the reasons they come to Zindi. So it's really a practical learning platform. But more recently, we are starting to host more formal learning content in partnership with some organizations like Microsoft and IBM. And then it's at a very early stage, but we're also starting to work on providing jobs or job matching or opportunities for our users, because we now have these users who are upskilling. They have all the skills they need. They have passion and enthusiasm. They don't necessarily have the opportunities for gainful employment yet. So that's kind of the logical evolution of the platform. We are a for-profit organization, social impact organization, or social entrepreneurship, you can call it. And in terms of a business model, we help organizations develop these solutions, or we help organizations promote capacity development and open source solutions, particularly on the continent. So I'll go through this fast, but as I said, we provide access to this community. So big tech companies like Microsoft and Google are interested in that, in reaching our community. We have 200 ambassadors across more than 30 African countries. So we're working very closely with all of the major and relevant data science communities on the continent. And then there's another sector of our clients that are interested in the solutions themselves. So it's up to the client whether the solutions are open sourced or not. And many clients hold on to the solutions because they want to put them into production in their own businesses. But we know from good experience that our community is producing best-in-class models. Mostly our focus is supervised machine learning, but we are expanding to generative AI and some other areas. And we know that we provide a very diverse set of models and approaches. So it often generates new ideas and new approaches. And then, as I mentioned, we are starting to work on helping organizations find talent as well. But I won't touch on that. We can go to the next one. So just briefly about our relationship with open source and the open source movement. We try to be as open as possible. As I mentioned, in some cases, the models developed in these challenges are the intellectual property of the people sponsoring the challenge. We can't open source that. That's not our decision. Probably something like 50% of the models developed by Zindi challenges are open. I mentioned some of our open source partners, Mozilla, Lacuna Fund, Radiant Earth, CGIAR. So you'll notice a lot of those are in agriculture. But some of our ITU challenges have also been open sourced. We have a GitHub repository with many of our models. So if you want to see what's available, you can look at GitHub/Zindi Africa. We encourage the use of open source tools and languages. You're not allowed to use proprietary software in developing models on Zindi. So you have to use Python or R, basically. So we believe very strongly in the open source movement, also because our users are not really in a financial position to pay for expensive proprietary software. This question gets a little bit more complicated when we get to the idea of open data, because open data is, I don't want to get into it, but it's a bit of a complex conversation, especially on the African continent. We really believe in the concept of data sovereignty, which is that the people who are going to benefit from the data should have ownership over it. So we try to promote that as much as we can. We can go to the next one. So then just briefly moving on to our partnership with ITU. We've worked with ITU for about 18 months now to host a number of challenges. ITU are interested in reaching a much broader audience with their challenges. These challenges, many are supervised machine learning, but this year we've been expanding into a few different areas. We have a blockchain challenge currently. We have this AI intuition challenge, which is a generative AI challenge, specifically focusing on retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. But quite a wide range and a growing collaboration. That number is not right. We've run 15 competitions with ITU in the last 18 months, and there are more to come. We've given away more than $50,000 in prizes to ITU winners. We've had, again, that number's a bit out of date. It's probably something like 3,500 users on ITU competitions. We estimate, it's hard to say exactly how much work people are doing, but we estimate something like 65,000 hours of work and representatives from more than 100 countries around the world. Okay, so now coming to the topic of the session today, we ran this AI intuition RAG challenge on Zindi. I'm not going to speak in much detail because we'll hear more about the challenge itself, but this is our second RAG challenge on Zindi, and actually the other one was also around public services. It was focused on helping public health professionals in Malawi to navigate the public health system. Again, this idea of using RAG to get the specific information, to retrieve specific information for people's context. So quite a similar challenge. I'm going to stop there. In general, just to speak more broadly, I think that the collaboration with ITU, and particularly a challenge like this, which is very cutting edge, looking at RAG and generative AI, this is exactly the kind of thing that we want on the Zindi platform. Our users thrive on cutting edge challenges, on interesting challenges, on locally relevant challenges, and I think it provides a great opportunity for our users to work on real problems, a challenge like this. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to host these challenges, and really looking forward to hosting more. I'll stop there. If there are questions, very happy to take them now, or I don't know what our time looks like. So if there's no time, I can also talk afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. Sure, maybe we could allow for a couple of questions from the audience, if there are any.
Okay, thank you first.
So hello, Lucian. Let's just say I'm an enthusiast. So I'm kind of curious. You are like caring a lot about making things open source and having people have access to open source software to create solutions. But how do you also consider this on the hardware side? Like, how do you avoid the might makes right problem of people with a lot of hardware having just better models, basically?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. It's a conversation we have all the time, this compute issue, and I'm starting to feel like access to compute should maybe be a human right. It's a massive problem, especially on the African continent. Most of our users are using like free versions of Google Colab for their coding, for the most part. Where we can, we try and source compute from the hosts. That happens, if we're working with Google or something like that, then we can often get compute. Sometimes it's sponsored. So we do try and find ways around that. What we do also do, though, is we sometimes will put compute restrictions on challenges. So we'll say your model has to run in 8 hours on X software, or you're not allowed to use TPU for this challenge, or, whatever the case is. But because we ran into exactly the might makes right problem, you had some dude sitting in the USA who just had access to all the compute he wants, and he would just brute force his way to the top of the leaderboard. So we are taking steps. The easiest way is to restrict people, which is, it sounds at first glance, it sounds like a negative thing, but especially in the African context, being able to deliver low resource use models is actually, there's an argument for that being more valuable than something that just chews through compute to achieve the same goal.
Any other questions? Okay. Maybe just say your name and what brings you here.
Matthias Lufkens, digital consultant. Sorry, can you define RAG? I didn't understand RAG.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm probably not the best person to define it. I'm not technical. RAG, the acronym stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. It is a relatively new tool to enhance or improve on the ability of large language models to find specific information in a body of text. And the relevance of that is to try and make something, to try and get LLMs, which are quite good generalists, to be more effective in a very specific context. So I can't speak about this challenge, but I can speak about the Malawi Public Health Challenge I mentioned. In that context, LLMs are great at answering general questions about health. They're awful at answering questions about how to fill out an epidemiological report in Malawi correctly, right? And there's a ton of text available for how to do that. There's a ton of guidelines and resources, but the LLMs don't know how to look for it. So RAG helps to fine-tune an LLM to look through specific bodies of text for those answers. I hope that is a good enough answer.
I think we've got one more question. The gentleman over there.
Good morning, Eric Vinninger from Food and Agriculture Organization. I'm very curious whether you also would think to go global. And my second question is, how do you relate to other challenge platforms such as Kaggle?
Two great questions, thank you. Yeah, this global versus regional conversation is something that we talk about a lot. In some senses, we are global already. We have participants from all over the place. We have ITU challenges coming from all over the globe. We see ourselves as a global platform, but we started in Africa. Our hearts are in Africa in a lot of ways. So it's a tricky one because there has been precedent of African startups abandoning their African roots in order to go global. So we're trying to balance those things. I do believe we have reach and the potential to help a lot of people in the global south, or rather than the global south, let me say, developing economies. And that's really where we see a lot of interest. We see, if we look by country statistics, India is our largest country and not an African country. So that tells you that the platform certainly has more global reach. And that kind of brings me to the next question. Yeah, hit me with the next question. I know there was a link. Kaggle, yes. So the appeal, what we see as the appeal of Zindi when we speak to our users, and our clients to an extent, is that we aren't Kaggle. Kaggle is big, first world, intimidating, and the challenges are not relevant to the people that we see on our platform. So most, we call our users Indians. Most Indians will tell you that they're not on Kaggle because it's not relevant to them. Kaggle doesn't have the solutions that they need. Kaggle doesn't support them in their learning journeys. And I believe that's true for a lot of the developing world. I think our thinking is that for every person on, every data scientist on Kaggle, there's one that's too intimidated to join Kaggle and might be more interested to join Zindi. We do also see ourselves as more of a professional network than Kaggle. Kaggle's really a competition platform. We see that competitions is just one aspect of what we do, which is why we are focusing on learning, career development, eventually talent matching. We see all of those things as a differentiator. But in terms of the actual technology on the platform, it's very similar. And there are a lot of other ones, you know, there's driven data and fruit punch, and there are a number. So yeah, we're not differentiated in terms of technology.
How are we with time?
Yeah, for the purposes of time management, I think we initially planned for a coffee break, but perhaps for the sake of time, we can agree that whoever wants some tea or coffee, you can always get one outside, but you know, to keep up with the schedule, we will keep going. And maybe if you could ask your question, like limited to a couple of minutes, and then, yeah, sure.
Thanks very much. My name is Marcia Cattle. I'm the Minister of Technology in Barbados. Just to reinforce a bit what you just said, that this kind of platform is very, very relevant to countries in the global south. And some of us are starting perhaps at even a different point farther back than some of the developers that you work with. So I wanted to ask, in terms of even promoting and supporting an emerging group of data scientists whose skills in data science and data analytics may not even be at the level to be able to participate yet, is there scope for that kind of support?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's our user base. We have, I would guess, a third of our users, when they sign up, they don't know how to build a machine learning model. That's very common in Africa because the institutions aren't really in place to build those skills. So people are joining in order. So say somebody will hear about data science. Well, it sounds like an interesting thing. They'll do some reading. Maybe they'll be a bit intimidated by the scope of it. They'll find a community. They'll find an AI chapter at their university or a Python community in their city. They'll go to some meetups. Somebody will say, you should try Zindi, or maybe they'll be going through a machine learning challenge on Zindi, and that's how people get into the field. And our idea is really that we want those people because we see Zindi as a capacity builder. We see that through a roughly 2-year cycle, people can go from zero experience to employment as a machine learning engineer or as a data scientist, just through the experience that they get on the Zindi platform. So we definitely see that as our target market. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks very much.
Roman, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Paul, for your presentation. It was very interesting to hear about what Zindi does, and just to build up on the last point that you made, that indeed capacity building, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence, is extremely important when we talk about applications of artificial intelligence in the context of developing countries, which unfortunately are often resource constrained. So we largely appreciate the work that Zindi does in this area, and we are very happy that we had the opportunity to collaborate. Again, I hope this was not the last opportunity, so looking forward to more similar challenges and projects in the future. Daniel, could you please give me again yes, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen again, just to talk a little bit more about the challenge itself. So the challenge that we ran on Zindi that Paul briefly mentioned about. Basically, the logic that we had in mind is that public sector institutions and governmental agencies in general are the ones who can benefit greatly from the applications of artificial intelligence. And one of the reasons is because public institutions are typically the main owners of data in countries, especially when it comes to developing countries. And so the ability to leverage this data to provide better services and to optimize both internal and external workflows can be a powerful catalyst for development. However, this data is typically unstructured. It's not well systematized, and oftentimes it's very disaggregated. So accessing this data, retrieving information from it, using this information to build and deploy something meaningful can indeed be challenging. And as was mentioned before by a couple of other speakers, retrieval augmented generation, which is a technology that allows to contextualize large language models and other natural language processing applications, seems like a very useful tool to empower those public sector actors to actually leverage the emerging AI technology and to build something on top of it. On this slide, you see just a few use cases or examples on how LLMs and artificial intelligence in general can be used by public sector entities. But again, at the foundation of all these use cases, there is data which these institutions need to somehow retrieve and somehow to interact with. So while there are already commercially available technologies and solutions for public sector entities to do that, there are a number of challenges that they face when it comes to using commercial solutions. And there are a certain number of related advantages that open source offers in that regard. So speaking from the perspective of an intergovernmental organization, which the International Telecommunication Union is, if our team at ITU would like to deploy a RAG pipeline to power some kind of an internal chatbot assistant, we do need to find budget for that. And this might not be much, but the more challenging process is to going through all the approvals that we need to obtain. We do need to obtain the approvals to actually share our data for the purposes of solution optimization. We need to launch a tender process to actually find the provider to serve our needs. And of course, we also would want to have enough control over that solution to customize it and not be stuck with something that is superimposed on us by some kind of a solution provider. And the vendor lock-in in general is another problem that we do try to address. So how open source can help with all these issues? Obviously, if there's an open source solution that a team within a government agency or public sector institution can run fully locally, this solves pretty much the issue of security and privacy because no data is leaving the institution. Everything is being processed locally. The issue of cost and administration is also solved because we don't need to ask for budget. If we have an open source solution that is free and that we can locally deploy, there is technically zero cost to us aside from the cost associated with the work of the staff. We have better control over performance and quality, and research has shown that there are a range of open source models that actually outperform commercial solutions on certain parameters. And we have fuller control when it comes to flexibility and fine-tuning, because we know where the solutions came from. There's no black box that has been built for us that we don't know what is inside of it. So this also helps to ensure that whatever we deploy adheres to a certain standard of ethics and transparency. And of course, as was mentioned by Paul, the use of open source is very much conducive to collaboration and partnerships, and this is something that we also like to promote. And on the next slide, you can see a couple of statistics from the challenge that we ran. So basically what we asked the participants of the challenge to do is to develop retrieval augmented solutions that are tailored to public sector and that are fully based on open source and that can run locally on personal devices, even in offline mode. And perhaps, Wendy, you can tell us a little bit more about how that went and what were the numbers.
All right, thank you, everyone. First, I wanted to say for the statistics, it's amazing seeing the level of outreach and engagement that we got from different countries, representing 180 plus participants with 36 different countries and 19 total successful submissions. More importantly, I'd like to talk about some of the technical insights from the challenge, which came out to be 3 main important points. The first one being that small embedding models are powerful and adaptable, which is critical considering the purpose of this challenge, the implementation of open source tools for the enhancement of public services. The second point, the challenges yielded some appreciated and expected results. When the documents were cleaned up through pre-processing and then divided into chunks, the level of accuracy increased. We're optimistic because this approach gives us a clear and simple path to success. Opting for the straightforward approach increases the likelihood of accurate results. The third part that with that being said, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and commend the applicants who utilized a fine-tuned embedded model. While it remains a complex endeavor, there was a group that successfully executed the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Let's hear from the challenge participants. I know that there are a few, actually 3 teams who are joining us online. So maybe I can pass the floor on to Bayan to invite the participants to present.
We have 3 participants connected online. So Victor, you are the first. The floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. Hi, Paul. Nice to see you. I enjoyed your presentation as well. All right. So I'm going to just talk a bit about some of what I was able to do personally. I loved the ITU challenge. It was, really amazing. And it was an opportunity as well for me to, personally own my skills, learn and hack with the community. And what I had to do essentially was to, understand the requirements and choose, tools, because the challenge was, essentially constrained to using open source tools, and where, we had to try to find a balance between having high accuracy and, of course, speed, because, these were models to be deployed on the CPU. So it meant that, we had to use, very small models, but yet we still had to have a very high percentage score, right? And just to also talk a bit about the key lessons, or what I personally gained from the challenge. I found that just as the last presenter said, model selection is actually very important. Trying different bunch of open source models, reading papers, reading research papers, and trying to find something that is very optimal for this challenge was, something I personally spent time on and loved. I personally also would agree that, the pre-processing mattered a lot. So where you had to, clean the data over and over to ensure you have very clean data going into the embedding models. And lastly, just to wrap up, since I have just about 1-2 minutes to talk about this, is my personal perception about open source AI. So in the course of the challenge, as mentioned, we were constrained, of course, to use open source tools in terms of development models that were used, open source models, and of course models which we clearly understand due to open papers and the likes, right? So the democratization of AI is very pertinent, and I think that's one of the reasons why open source is really great. And of course, being able to find the right models for your solution as well. It's also in several pool of models. It's also really great, and getting to build on top of the work of the open source community as well was something that I personally love about. Is something I personally love about open source as well. And lastly, the last question for me was to talk about what I would like policymakers to do to promote open source. I think having such programs like this are really awesome. Getting to talk about open source and getting to collaborate on open source projects as well. So I would personally say much more funding and support for projects. So Paul has talked much about some of the challenges that were faced. So for me as well, I heard there was a team that was able to get to fine-tune models, and I think that's really great. Fine-tuning models are very technical, and as Paul has mentioned, they require some sort of compute as well. Some of which it's quite difficult, especially coming from for me coming from an African perspective as well. So getting access to such resources are really constraining, right? So I would say much more funding and support to develop more open source projects, grant subsidies, and even programs as well to promote small models and models that can run on small computes. I would also say education and training as well. Maybe we could do more to invest in educational programs and training initiatives as well to promote more open source technologies and practices. Just to also point out myself, Paul already answered a question that was asked about how people go from 0 to hero in the data science space. And I myself, I'm a very clear example of that. I joined Zindi more than 4 years ago, where I knew next to nothing about data science and machine learning. And now I've gone on that trajectory path. I've been able to grow and build myself in the space. And so that's really amazing. So platforms such as Zindi has really helped me to grow right along the span of years. So while I was still in school, I was able to develop myself. So graduating both as a graduate and a data science expert. And lastly, I'll just point out more collaborative work between researchers and policymakers as well to share knowledge and work on joint projects. But overall, once again, it was a really awesome challenge, and I'm glad I got to get my hands dirty to work on RAG and building for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. And now we're passing the floor to Mr. Singh.
Hi everyone. Is my voice audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So good afternoon. I'm Aditya Singh, from a software engineer from India, working at Hughes City. So first of all, I'd like to appreciate everyone's presentation before me. It was wonderful, and I would like to thank AI for Good Summit for this opportunity, as well as Zindi and ITU for providing us with this platform to showcase the potential of open source generative AI. I firmly believe that open source generative AI, with obviously appropriate safeguards and appropriate safeguards against malicious intent or misuse, has a great opportunity for collaboration with increasing collaboration with as many people as possible and to the masses, and also increasing accessibility to cutting edge technology methods and algorithms. So this consequently, I believe, fast forwards the research and development in our field, as we can see with leading initiatives in the LLM scene, such as Llama Index, LangChain, DSPY Stanford, and such. And I've also seen, like, in fact, I've since, as Victor mentioned before me, that have to reading papers to, present to implement solutions. So I've seen new papers on new algorithms come out, and within a matter of few days of them releasing, there is a complete introduction of a new library that helps us implementing those algorithms. So I believe that with this initiative that Zindi and ITU has done, this could definitely be this is definitely a good direction for research and development in the field. So with that, I think if I'm able to share, I can just share a quick solution outline, which involved, which basically involved the fine tuning of our model. So I think I'll just share it in this mode. Is my screen visible? Just if someone can.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Our team name was HSC DL, and the team members were Om Prakash Sahu, Ipshita Datta, and myself. And so what basically this whole challenge, it was based around the retrieval part of the retrieval augmented generation, and not exactly the generation part. So there were four main ideas that we focused on, which was, one was fine-tuning the embedding model, second was re-ranking, and third was indexing of the vector database, of the knowledge database that we have. And finally, we had a query optimization, which also involved a multi-stage retrieval process. So basically, if we're talking about fine-tuning, as Victor mentioned before me, it is definitely a compute-heavy process. And it did take us some amount of compute, some amount of GPU compute to actually perform this. So we basically created, from the PDF that was provided to us during the challenge, we created positive pairs, which basically means queries from the document itself, as well as the context that are relevant to the queries, obviously. And using that, what we basically did was we fine-tuned our model and created a loss function, which basically fine-tuned our embedding model, which was the open source by large English model. And we found that fine-tuning the model, especially when we are creating a RAG solution for a domain-specific data, such as public services, we are basically, what we are doing is in a coordinate space, in a 3D coordinate space, we're just shuffling around the embeddings that was already created by the base by large model. So, in public services, we can have an example of regulation and compliance, where regulation pertains to some rules that, we can also relate to compliance in this sector, whereas outside of this sector, they can have completely divergent meanings. So in this sector, they would have slightly closer embeddings in the coordinate space. So in such cases, embedding of fine-tuning model, the fine-tuning of embedding model is really an important step, we felt. Next, we can see just the outline of the main processes, of the main advantages of our solution. One was the three-step chunking process. Since we found the retrieval part of the retrieval augmented generation, it is mainly based on an empirical step, which is the cosine similarity. And I'm sorry, I'm going into some technical details. So if you have any questions after this, I'll be open to that. The empirical part is the cosine similarity. But we found that adding an extra generative step before that, where we included the LLM, we can reduce the noise in our model, as well as get more precise and accurate chunks. That is our final output. Next, as I mentioned before, we were fine-tuning. And third, we used an open source module, DSPY, which helped us use chain of thought prompting, which basically allowed us to generate queries and generate answers that basically used a systematic approach to answer the question based on the context. And finally, we used the HNSW, which is hierarchical navigable small worlds indexing for our vector database. And this is just a quick outline. I'm not sure if you're able to see it. Yeah, this is just a quick outline of our solution where, as I mentioned before, we create the embeddings or using our fine-tuned embedding model. Before that, we do semantic chunking, and we create our FICE index, which is our vector database. After that, over here, we can see with this magnifying glass icon, we perform retrieval 3 times. And each of those 3 steps are very important in our entire workflow, since they help us get the refined and accurate chunks without some extra noise. So yeah, that is basically our, the outline of our solution. And I definitely believe that there is in RAG, since RAG was introduced due to the limitations of context windows in LLMs. But now with introduced like new research papers that allow expansion in context windows in LLMs as well, I still feel that advanced RAG has a slightly better performance compared to large context windows in LLMs. And I definitely believe that open source AI is the way where we can all share compute and develop in this area. And one of the questions which I think Victor also replied to was using like how the policymakers can allow for more open source AI. So I believe that it is basically, I believe just one solution is that we can share compute for it, so everyone can develop on a level field. Yeah, thank you. That's it from my side.
That is very impressive, Mr. Singh. Thank you. And now we're passing the floor to Vincent.
Hello, hi everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you for this opportunity as well to share our work. So I'll share my my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much. I'm Vincent Perez. I'm on I'm the head of the innovation team at the whole team. So I don't see some of my lead connected, but anyway, I'll if you have any technical question, I'll be able also to answer for the first part, I think. But the idea is to show a little bit what we did in terms of the overall, as we have a small amount of time, but the overall approach, which is similar to the one we just saw as well, and some maybe specificity that we would like to highlight, and then our approach, some of the challenges that we faced, the lessons learned over our journey through this hackathon, and then maybe open points on our perception of the open source field at the moment, and some expectations as well that we could have for the future. So I stay like this. I hope you can see my screen quite well. Basically, the main idea was based on the documents we were provided to load and vectorize basically the information. So I did dive in here where for PDF documents, so we used some of the OCR capabilities, open source OCR capabilities, and then retrieving the information in full text. Then we were using some of the open source as well, base model that we fine-tuned to as a regex splitter to retrieve the list of sentences with meaning. So, and then we were processing with the embedding sentences. I'll deep dive a little bit on what we did. Also, we used Chroma DB as well for the for the similarities approach, for the similarities mechanism before splitting them into chunks and vector in our vector database. So then as for the query, so basically we were applying a refining of the query, then searching over the embedding vector database, retrieving the 10 most relevant chunks, and then we also had a mechanism to re-rank the 10 chunks selected on the first retrieval to return the top 5 chunks. So that was the overall idea. Few things that we could share on the model. So we used the majority of the components that we based our development on Hugging Face open source libraries. So we were able to identify a lot of open source components that we included into our overall mechanism. Our selections in terms of those components were based on multiple factors, but the main was the accuracy and the efficiency of all of them, based on what the community also was saying on those different components. We also leverage what we did for other system or other solutions that we have in terms of the vectorization. So we were having, so the idea is to also reuse our experience in this by using some of the open source components to have a full kind of open source experience or open source solution. We also had a lot of fine-tuning. That was, I think, the most important thing in this challenge was to fine-tune based on the document also we were provided, which leads to actually quite good results. In terms of face challenges, so one of the important one is that we handled, but everyone was facing this issue due to the different format and layouts, and some models were more or less more effective with some layouts. So basically, a huge fine-tuning was necessary at this stage, but we could leverage quite a lot the AI community and also some of the guidance provided by the community, especially on the components we have selected, especially on Hugging Face libraries. Another challenge that we found was to define more or less the optimal size of the chunk, because the results were not that good if the chunk was too large, but also too small. We were losing the meaning, so there was quite a lot of fine-tuning in this challenge that we faced. And the third challenge that could be highlighted here is that we wanted to go a little bit further in terms of fine-tuning our model. So we try to more or less recreate some data sets based on what was available as well. And this was quite hard to manage to get good quality at the end, not impacting, I would say, the accuracy of our model. So that was also one of the challenge that we faced. In terms of lessons learned, so we could have a lot, but we selected few of them. I already touched upon the chunk size, which was quite, I would say, an important point of the whole challenge for us. So this led to a lot of fine-tuning and testing. What we understood or thought is that the most important then phase or I would say part in this challenge was the ingest component part. So this was really so we had a lot of work on this to make sure that we have good results at the end. We also yeah, there is one thing that was quite important as well, is that I would say the pre-processing of the input query was very important. We had to fine-tune the query as well. This one of the point that should not be underestimated to at the end get the most of the model and the LLM model. And also one point was that the embedding model overall is extremely demanding to accurately also generate vectors. So that's one thing to consider if we were to move to, I would say, a more industrialized solution.
Vincent.
Sorry, now I'm back. Sorry. I was coughing a little bit. So. And in terms of our perception and expectation of the open source AI field, so what we could say is that we could see definitely through the community and then also all the open source models more and more available. We could see that to us the community is actually growing. We could see this with a lot of also we've been working in the Web3 actually decentralized world also for a couple of years now, and we could see that it's growing and growing. So that's our perception. It's a good thing, and we could say that the access to data, it's a little bit behind for us, but then model is actually quite democratized at this stage for us. So we found that we have a lot of available components and open source components available now. We can see that it's also bringing a lot of new innovations in different sectors, and that people are leveraging those open source, and we could see some of the non-lucrative causes also investing in open source AI model, which is a very good thing. In terms of, because there was a very good point in terms of expectation from the I would say the rule maker or even the community. So which among the team we think would be very good is to have a little bit more of scientific papers so that we could rely on, and also more, of course, more and more models available would be great, but we have already say a good amount, and it's growing. It would be also good to have some advanced courses, as it's being also democratized. Some of the I would say key leaders in this field are actually producing some courses, so it's good, but it would be good to see more and more. And another point is the access to data, because now the model is the models are actually some models are being produced but trained on a certain set of data, and we see, and I think everyone agrees here, that the data set is really key in this project, but also all models. So also it would be great to have more and more quality data sets also offered as a open source to be able on specific fields, for example, to train new models and to be used in such challenges or models as well. Yes, so in few words, I don't know if I was too long or not, but basically, the rest of the slide could be to answer some question at some point, but yeah, thank you very much for listening as well.
Thank you, Vincent, for such an interesting presentation and your experience. And now I would like to ask all the participants to turn on their cameras so we can take a group photo.
Yeah, Vincent, so just for that purpose, if you don't mind to stop sharing your presentation, that way we can see everybody on a bigger screen. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you again to all the participants. To conclude with some kind of message, I think the key point that we were trying to make is that thanks to the open source, artificial intelligence can become really accessible, and anyone, even a non-technical team within any public institution or department, could have access to state-of-the-art technology that they could use to benefit either the internal workflows or the citizens who end up using public services. And just as a way of closing this session, we were hoping to run a quick demo of a application that we developed internally at ITU. And basically, just to provide you with some context, there is a wonderful project that ITU is running, which is called GovStack. And GovStack is a project that develops technology specifications for different types of building blocks of the digital public infrastructure. And as part of this project, a lot of work went into actually defining the specifications of the different building blocks. As you can see here, there are a few of them. And one of the things that inevitably will happen at some point is that we will need to evaluate technology providers against the specifications that the GovStack project has produced. And this process is very generalizable, no matter whether you're checking compliance of something with regulations or laws, whether you're running a procurement, you have some kind of a body of information that you need to ensure that the product or the application complies with. And one of the way of doing this is exactly through artificial intelligence, leveraging retrieval augmented generation applications. So here you can see some of the functional requirements that have been defined for the e-marketplace building block under the GovStack project. And imagine there is an application that has been produced that we need to evaluate against these requirements. I'm just going to quickly launch the document which has the necessary information. Apologies for the slight delay. So assume we have this document, we want to evaluate it against the functional requirements that we have developed under the GovStack project. And here's basically a demonstration of a way to do that with just a few lines of code. And as you can see, the application is running currently, but the key point that we're really trying to make is that this solution is fully local. It doesn't require any external APIs. It runs on this machine. It has been developed pretty much overnight by a team of non-technical people using fully open source solutions that are completely localizable. And the point that we're trying to make is that if we are able to do this, this means that probably any team within any public institution, within any government sector entity could probably benefit from these same tools and arrive at something meaningful. the solution takes a little bit of time to run because it is local and we're using semantic chunking, which is a little bit compute demanding, but it should finish in a few seconds, hopefully. And in the meantime, perhaps if there are any questions remaining before we close the session, I'd like the floor to ask. Yes, and by the way, the output is ready. So as you can see, it provides an assessment of compliance with different types of requirements, and it has done it while I was speaking here at the stage, running fully locally on this machine. So thanks to the open source, thanks to stakeholders and platforms who promote open source, and thank you very much for your attention. It has been a pleasure.
Thank
All
you very
right.
much. You're
Thank you. Thank you very much to Paul, to everyone here, but also to everyone who joined in online. And we are running a tad bit behind schedule. So we just had to make some arrangements with the agenda. But now I'm very happy to introduce our next session, which is a panel discussion to really look into the role of open source AI as digital public goods, and then explore that from different perspectives, from a government perspective, with someone who's joining in from Kenya, from the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, also from a more technical perspective, with someone who has expertise in RAG, which you've heard about plenty of times right now. Unfortunately, I have to announce that Senator Lagunes from Mexico has fallen ill, so she unfortunately will not be able to join us today. But to kick us off and to moderate the session, I'm glad and very happy to welcome Leah Gimple on the stage, Director for AI and Engagement at the Digital Public Goods Alliance. And Leah will kick us off with a short spotlight. So Leah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Daniel. So I have now the pleasure to contextualize a bit more what we've heard so far in terms of applications and projects that have been developed in the context of the digital public goods concept, and at the same time make sure that we are not running over time. So that's a bit of a challenge, but I will try my best to do so. So as said, I'm Leah Gimple, Director of AI and Country Engagement at the Digital Public Goods Alliance. The DPGA is a member-based organization that supports the investment and development use of digital public goods. What digital public goods are, I will say in a minute. And we focus predominantly on low and middle income countries. So digital public goods are defined in the UN high-level roadmap for digital cooperation as open source AI systems, open source software, open data, and open content. And we're going to talk today, obviously specifically about the open AI system part. So what are features of digital public goods? We can basically think of DPGs as open source plus, as we say internally, because they rely on the open source definition. They advance the SDGs and they do no harm by design, and that is captured in the DPG standards that we as an organization maintain and are the custodian of. So when it comes to open source AI, there's a bit of confusion around the term, actually. I mean, we have OpenAI as a company that is actually not open. There are claims of companies that say that their systems are open source and others say they are not. So where do we stand in this regard? The open source initiative as a custodian of the open source definition is currently running a process to defining open source AI. That's also what we rely on as a Digital Public Goods Alliance, because as I said, open source is key. So we rely on the industry standards, so to say, for the open source definition. Unfortunately, that's still a multi-stakeholder process that is in development. So we currently don't have any official open source AI definition, but we already have version number 0.8, which gives a good hint at where this is going to land. And that is very relevant for us at the DPGA as well, because it will be the basis for updating the DPG standard, because this standard was developed in 2019 and doesn't necessarily fit well the AI developments that we've seen in recent years. Just a quick snapshot of how this open source definition looks like. I think the main And most important point really is that you don't need to open up your AI training and testing data. There is, of course, that's a contested issue. Others might think you should, but in fact, the current version at least pertains that you don't need to do so. And I think that's really helpful when we think about open source AI and AI DPGs, because it gives a bit more leeway of what is actually acceptable. And just quickly around the rationale, why are open data not part of the definition? It's just because open data doesn't, I mean, the open AI training data doesn't come down to the source code of software. So in order to actually, there's some background noise, but yeah, someone's speaking. Oh yeah, yeah, that's the other room actually. No one online, okay, good. No, what I just wanted to say is that in order to exercise the freedoms to use, study, modify, and share a system, you don't need the training data set. That's the underlying rationale behind this. Happy to chat more about this, of course, later on. And despite these insecurities around open source definition, there's a huge momentum around open source currently, open source AI. So we see in the G20 process that open source AI is discussed as an alternative to proprietary solutions because it gives people access and the means to develop their own solutions to meet their own ambitions, especially from global majority countries. So I think that's really interesting to see that this was put on the agenda by the Brazilian G20 presidency. We also see that in the 2024 UN resolution on AI for sustainable development, open source AI is mentioned as a means to help achieve the sustainable development goals. And also in the latest version of the Global Digital Compact, open source AI or AI DPGs in that sense are mentioned. So I think that's really, well, motivating and also promising when it comes to making more of these technologies accessible to bigger parts of the world. So what I quickly want to do is to run through some of the benefits of open source AI, and I think we've heard a few of them as well, but also quickly look at the risk and myth behind it. And I will be as concise as possible, so I hope that we're going to have enough time for the discussion as well. So just quickly, why are AI DPGs such an important topic? Because it really comes down to democratizing AI development. And that means to look not only at the level of use, but look at the level of development capacities, at the level of benefit sharing, and at the democratization of AI governance as well, to truly make this technology revolution inclusive. And AI DPGs really are fundamental, as we've already heard, to give people access to these powerful technologies and to developer resources. So I think that was quite evident in the presentations and comments that we've just heard in the previous session. Of course, they also can empower the development of solutions for local ambitions and needs and make sure that these contexts are represented in AI systems. Because what we currently see, of course, is that there's a market and power concentration in AI development. So a lot or most of the powerful systems, if not all, are developed in the global north. And of course, this represents a certain set of values, a certain set of cultural aspects, and it definitely doesn't represent the diversity of the world. And of course, open source AI can help in this regard. And then, of course, there are also the opportunities to develop solutions where actually big tech would never invest because it's not a market opportunity for them, especially when it comes, for instance, to smaller languages, to really subdomain local use cases that are super relevant for a small amount of people, but are actually not really a business opportunity. So there, open source AI can help as well. And yeah, as I said, in terms of also looking a little bit more from with a bird's eye perspective, open source also helps to not entrench existing power imbalances in the AI ecosystem. I mean, to a certain extent, if you really look down into the stack, you don't really have many alternatives, but you can use open source AI to actually help empower your own local AI ecosystem and also create economic opportunities, avoid vendor lock-in and such. Next slide, please. So the myths, risks, barriers, and other challenges. Of course, there's stuff to talk about, and I try to do this concisely. So let's quickly jump in. In terms of myths, the quality of open source solutions is worse than of proprietary solutions. It might be the case, but it might also not be the case. That's content dependent. And if you find that the open source AI solutions that you would like to use is worse, it actually just means that we need more adoption of these tools because the huge benefits that proprietary AI developers have is that they have a huge user base. They can use all of this proprietary data to make their systems better. So open source solutions actually need user adoption, even if it means that you need to start with a system that maybe doesn't meet all of your requirements in the first place. But it is really an important aspect to ensure that power is not entrenched in the way we currently see it. Then bigger is better. I think we already heard about small models. So there's a huge opportunity there, especially in terms of the need for compute power, for instance, but also in the need of data to fine-tune models. So that's definitely something that's looked into. And of course, that's especially relevant for low and middle income countries. And then the long-term maintenance of insecurities around open source technologies. I mean, that's a, open source evergreen. And I can just say the same goes for proprietary solutions. There are proprietary solutions that are discontinued and not supported anymore. It happens for open source projects as well, but that's something we have to deal with no matter what kind of solution we are going to implement. Then, of course, the foundational risk debate around open source AI. Let me just say we have a limited understanding of the risks. We have very limited evidence, so we definitely need more rigor and less doom stories in these conversations. And we also need more, research, of course, in AI safety, AI robustness. We need industry standards for the safe disclosure of such models. And we also need to look at the interplay between technological safeguards and solutions and policy and regulatory requirements. That's a toolbox that we need to develop collectively. And that again goes for all kinds of solutions again, so proprietary and open source. And let's jump to the public sector as well. Of course, there are barriers that we see, especially in low and middle income countries. I think some have been mentioned as well around capacity and skills, for instance. But of course, there are also liability questions linked to open source and legal insecurities regarding intellectual property rights. That's, for example, due because it's still not clear if model weights actually fall under intellectual property rights and you can use licensing as done by almost all developers, or actually if we need other legal tools to make sure that these are shared in a safe way here. Then procurement processes, I think it's an evergreen as well. We know it's a challenge, so let's look into this as well. Insufficient data availability was already mentioned, lack of talent as well. And of course, access to compute. That's an evergreen topic in the current discussion that we see here, especially as well. So I'm going to jump over the example and just give a brief outlook. So what do we actually need going forward? I think I already mentioned this when I talked about risk. We need a nuanced understanding of AI risks. We need accelerated AI safety and robustness research. Pertains to open source and proprietary solutions. We need standard tools for responsible AI governance, audits, risk assessment, etc. There's a bunch of stuff out there. It's really hard to know what you should implement and also to understand the burden that this places on you in terms of capacity that you need. So we need to definitely to some more convergence around this. We need capacity development and skills training. And of course, understand also procurement, but not only the hurdles, but use this as a strategic tool in the sense of public money, public code. And lastly, on a more, meta level as well, really understand what is happening here in the AI production chain, in the value chain. Understand that this is not only about if it's open source or is it proprietary, it's really about digital self-determination. So I think that's a really important point as well. And then also we need to look into new concepts such as public resources for AI development that really put public interest first, for compute, for instance, but also to close the data divide, pooled funding and resources, but also new institutions for democratic oversight and governance of these systems to really make AI fully democratic in all of the 4 levels that I mentioned. And with this run through, I'm now really happy to invite my panelists on stage. We have here in the room Guillaume Andor. He's a management and technology consultant at Ernst & Young. Welcome. Please find a seat here. And online, we should have Edmond van Derer, the Principal Data Protection Officer and head of the Kisumu Regional Office of the Data Protection Officer in Kenya. So perhaps we can see Edmond as well, so that we really have a little bit of panel feeling here.
Edmond, if you maybe just say a little word, then we can at least see you on that little preview screen.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Sure,
Hi, Edmond.
thanks.
Okay, over to you, Leah.
Thank you so much. So let's dive right into this. I would like to talk with these two a bit more about implementation, but also about technology development and an outlook of what's going to come next in the next few, I don't know, months and years. I think we speak more about months here, but let's see about that. And firstly, Edmond, I think we already heard about the chatbot solution earlier from Brian from Think. But it also is super interesting to hear your perspective why you decided to build an AI chatbot in the first place and why you decided to do this in an open source way.
Thank you. Allow me first of all to introduce myself properly. My name is Edmond Wandera, as it's been adequately introduced. I work for the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, Kenya. As the Principal Data Protection Officer, I head the Kisumu Regional Office. Our mandate a bit about what we do as an office to regulate processing of personal data. This is based on the Data Protection Act, which is an act that was enacted in this country to give a life to the constitutional right to privacy, which is a fundamental right. That is Article 31C of our Constitution. Now, back to your question, why did we choose or decide to do a chatbot? If you look at our mandate, part of our mandate is to do awareness creation, register data controllers and data processors, do investigations and compliance, and generally being a new kid in the block, looking at regulating the processing of personal data. There are a lot of expectations from the general public that we serve as a public entity. And a lot of people will have questions to the office on how we execute our mandate, what are their rights, what are the obligations for the data handlers, and so forth. To do that, we had to ask ourselves as an office, how best do we reach out to these people? Remember, as a regulator, we regulate both public and private entities. We're looking at a population of about close to 50 million Kenyans. These are all potential business owners, right? So you can imagine about entities that are yet to be registered and those that are already into business handling personal data. So this might sound a very humongous challenge or expectation for the office to reach out to all these people and entities. So we had to ask ourselves, how best can we reach out to this particular clientele who are citizens and actually get to understand what we do and how this space is regulated. And AI came in as a better option, and that is why we thought of doing a chat box as a quick fix to this particular challenge. And having done some bit of research on it as an office, with the assistance of our developing partners, that is GIZ, we must mention and thank them for the support. AI came in handy, and that's how we arrived at doing a chatbot. And so far, it's doing a great job for us.
Thank you so much for this background information. Looking at you, Gulyam, you're working with AI and the UN system specifically, but also with countries, I believe. So can you tell us a bit more about the recent development and specifically about retrieval augmented generation, or RAG? We have heard this already here, but can you contextualize a bit more why this represents an interesting compromise for those having fewer resources and narrower application areas?
Thank you very much, Leah. So indeed, fine-tuning a model is a very expensive and very difficult operation. And so RAG is an alternative which is very interesting in many regards. The first one is the efficiency. So you don't need to have that level of skill set and that level of computing power to contextualize the use of AI through RAG. So it's a very adaptable solution as well, because you can really choose an architecture, and we saw that with the different use cases presented before. Different options were taken by different architecture teams, and it's really interesting to see that depending on the use case you are trying to implement, you can really make the right choice based on the right use case. Another aspect that is very interesting in RAG is its scalability. If you fine-tune a model, you have a fixed data set, and upgrading it, updating it is a very difficult task. While with RAG, you can automatically connect your new documents to your model and so have a model that is always up to date. So all of those aspects made the use of RAG a very efficient solution for making it relevant for those organizations and for all the different entities that have limited access to resources, technical but also computational power. It makes RAG a very relevant option.
Thank you so much. I think that's super interesting then, especially for the context we are speaking predominantly about. Can you tell us quickly what roles do market gaps and market failures play in developing local solutions? Is this something you experience in your consultancy work?
So absolutely, we were asked. Thank you very much. So indeed, in our work, we have been involved in many development of AI-based products that were aiming at bridging unmet needs, for instance. So one use case that was really interesting is, for example, making everyone available to speak his native language, to access all the public form and all the different public systems. So the automated translation of the people, the ability to fill directly all the administrative form and all the legal form is a fantastic use case we have already been involved in. So this is one of the market gaps, so meeting the unmet need. So AI is also very relevant, I believe, in identifying those unmet needs, because the identification of pattern among a vast data set is also something that AI is doing extremely well. And so we've also worked in that field. Another aspect, another gap that is interesting, I believe, is the personalization and the customization of those models. So we need to contextualize the information, the output of those models. And there is one aspect which is particularly interesting is around regulation. So you need to adapt all the regulation to the specificities of the ground. And in order to provide the best information to the different people, we have been involved also in developing those type of model. In regard of market failures, so the first one that comes to mind is often information asymmetry. And we believe that AI has at the same time a formidable potential in that regard, but it's also representing some risk. So of course, it's a way to access vast amounts of data and knowledge for many people, which is a fantastic positive trend. But at the same time, we have a risk that we see massive corruption of information on the web, for example, due to AI. And so we need to be extremely conscious of the governance we develop around AI. This is something that I believe is not prioritized enough today, because governing properly AI requires, of course, principles, and we start to have a number of solid policies already in place or in development, but it requires much more. And as a consultant, it's probably something we have experienced a bit before many different stakeholders, is as we were asked a couple of years ago to start implementing the first model, we didn't have the extra level after the policy. So what KPIs should we track? How do we create those KPIs? And what tool do we use to monitor the behavior of those models? So we see some progress in that regard. So Anthropic released a fantastic paper last week for the most passionate about how we can interpret how a model is behaving. But there is a need, I believe, for an easy access to those KPIs, of course, but also to the tooling necessary to monitor the model. Because monitoring properly the model requires to have computing powers. And so I had some interesting discussion, I believe, with some stakeholders that had not enough resources to train the model and to govern properly the model. And so a choice has been made into, should we develop the model and develop its efficiency, or should we govern properly our model? So to make sure that the right choice and sufficiently resource are allocated to governing AI I believe it's an extremely important aspect. So the last one that I would mention is mitigating externalities. So in economy, it's been decades that we are trying to internalize the negative externalities into the operating model, into the business model that public and private entity use. And so I think AI can be extremely useful in that regard. So first for identifying those negative externalities, of course, and in a second step to redesign an operating model, public and private, to make sure that those negative externalities are incorporated into the operating model. So we have some interesting use case in that regard, for example, in climate change mitigation. So where we see that, and AI is a perfect example, I believe, because we know that training model is consuming an enormous number of resources. And so to integrate those negative externalities into the use of AI, to make sure that we develop new model and new way to train the model to decrease those negative externalities is one of the key topics we are discussing today with many different stakeholders.
Thank you so much. This was already a bunch of different topics that we could dive deeper into. Just in terms of the carbon footprint of models, I didn't dive deeper into the DPG standard update, but that's going to be a part of this as well. Because as an organization that is working towards the attainment of the sustainable development goals, obviously sustainability of model development is a key factor in this as well. And just picking up some of the things that you said, I think it's super interesting to hear about the governance challenge in terms of not only that we need the right policies and regulations, but we also need on a more technical level the right tools, and that this requires additional computing power, which actually adds to this challenge of how to bridge the compute divide and make sure that AI is responsibly implemented wherever it is implemented, so in all parts of the world. And we also talked about unmet needs. So I think what you implemented, Edmond, in Kenya it's an example of an unmet need. So none of the big tech companies came to Kenya and said, okay, we need a chatbot for the Data Protection Commission, but you actually decided that you need this because you saw the need for this kind of information. Can you tell us a bit more about the lessons learned from the process of building the chatbot? And what would you share with others who are interested in developing something similar for public service delivery?
Thank you. And I want to start by actually acknowledging and relating to the sentiments made by Julian about the need for governance in terms of AI implementation. Like any other solution that you want to implement, it is proper that the environment be regulated or have a framework that actually speaks to or guides how those things are supposed to be done. AI is coming in very heavily today, but I think works are in the making to develop a governance framework. What are some of the lessons that we derive from implementation of the chatbot? First, it's actually based on open source. And we build this because we've got available frameworks that are already existing. It gives you the latitude to utilize the source code that can be actually coded and narrowed down to the specific need that you require as an institution. We're looking at available similar AI projects that are already available on technological platforms like GitHub that already have utilized the knowledge base that is existing to do what we call the initial learning. One thing that I think people should, or other entities that want to do such should borrow from is, one, you ought to treat it as a project. I think in the one of the presenters from the session during this summit mentioned that it's important that you have a start and the end date for any project that you're doing. William speaks about KPIs. You can only have that if you're treating as a project so that you stay in course of the implementation. Number two, you need to identify the need. Very important, we talked about that. I must mention that our AI is actually specific and has been trained to data protection matters. And therefore, if you are to engage it on anything outside that, it will actually not be able to help you out. So you've got to be specific on exactly what you need to do. Number 3 is we looking at leveraging on existing technologies. Like it said, you might not need to reinvent the wheel where there's something already somewhere that you can develop from, and that will actually help you reduce in terms of cost and the time of implementation. Most importantly, that I must mention is that you must engage the SME subject matter experts. I remember in the deployment of any AI, there is the bit of training of this particular chatbot. And this is a learning program or application. So if you actually do not have sufficient subject matter experts to help in the learning, to help you walk it through the learning process, then it might not be as accurate and effective in its discharge of its duty. We also noticed that it requires some bit of patience because we're talking about a learning model, right? So you need to be a bit patient with it. It will not be as perfect on day one because by that time, although it has leveraged on the existing knowledge base there, but it might not be as effective as it will be when time goes by. So you need to be patient with it, allow it time to learn as it's engaging the subject matter experts, and as you continue doing the training process for that. And I think just to cap that up is the need for the governance framework that my colleague speaks about, a policy framework probably that guides again how this should be implemented will come in handy for any implementation that institutions want to do. But I think those will be what I'll flag out to be the very high level lessons that we learned from this, from the implementation of the chatbot that we did as an office.
Thank you so much, Edmund, for sharing. I think this is very, very valid points. And I especially like your point about patience, right? And this relates quite well to the point on why should you use open source, also to strengthen the open source community and build the tools that that's yours, basically. And as I said earlier, it sometimes requires a bit of patience, but you will also get the benefits from that. And just in terms of meeting the needs, I work in AI, but I'm also an international development professional. And I would always say, let's not mistake every problem that we want to solve for something that needs an AI solution. Just as a little side note, there are always, it's always good to consider low-tech solutions as well, right? Just because you have a hammer, not everything is a nail. But apart from that, I think these are really good points, and probably we should also write them up in terms of giving guidance to other implementers to do that. With this, maybe let's just switch over and complement this perspective from Edmund, more from the consultancy side. So you work with UN organizations, you work with governments. What is it that you see, Guillaume, in terms of why are people motivated to use open source technology? So why is this such an important aspect, and why is it so important to also open source such novel developments as RAGs?
So one of the key aspects that motivates people, I believe, to use open source technology is the ability to bridge the digital gap. So it gives access to the greatest number to those technology. And it creates also a very interesting effect in the community, an exchange of knowledge gathered by all these partners, and the ability to test and exchange on methodology, development techniques, architecture. And we see something which is comparable, I think, with a research field, where we see that all the researchers in the world exchange their discoveries and exchange their knowledge. So the open source allow that to fully develop a solution, to fully develop a prototype, and to exchange with many colleagues and create a real community behind it. So you mentioned democratizing technology before, and I think it's something which is very important and that we have seen clearly in previous initiatives. So we participated in MOSIP initiative in India, so Digital ID. And we could clearly see that we were sparking a whole ecosystem. So because we provided this access to technology, we instantly saw many different initiatives sparkling. So as people had ID, they could open bank account, they could start initiative, company, private, public entities, and so that's for us something very important, and that's why we are so involved in DPGs, is because we believe that by providing those building blocks, fundamental bricks, we are actually allowing a world of opportunity during the next stage. So that's something which is very important for us. On the second aspect of your question, I think that, so I mentioned the research domain, which is very important for me, and I think we see a clear takeoff from AI in research. So we have some fantastic success already in biology, for example, and healthcare research. We saw a spark which is unimaginable, how much and how profound it is, we believe.
Thank you so much. So I think, yeah, I think we all speak in some ways the same language here, right? Even if you're coming from the private sector and we are coming from a different side, it's really, really interesting to see that there's such huge alignment around these aspects, and really promising as well, I think, because we need the private sector, obviously, in this endeavor. Edmund, when, I mean, as that, if you have a hammer, not everything should be a nail, but still looking at the potential of open source AI in the public sector, where would you see, where would you see application areas? Where would you see use cases from a Kenyan perspective, maybe from a broader perspective, and also barriers? Maybe what is it that you would need to overcome to realize such applications?
Thank you. And I like the statement that if you have a hammer, you should not see everything as a nail. But again, I must be quick to say that if you want to drive it in, then the hammer will be the next. If it's sorting out the problem, use it because you have it already. Yes, we're looking at what are the other potential areas of application of AI. Public sector or public entities exist, governments exist to serve the general public. And predominantly, these are citizens. If you look at what governments do, we're looking at offering services that right from issuing IDs, passports, registration of businesses, name them, every other sector as such. And sometimes it becomes a bit harder to reach out to these particular citizens so that they can enjoy those services. Today, we're talking about citizens enjoying public services with less hassles or troubles. And I think that will be what every other government will want to do. So for me, and for us, if you were to ask me, I'll say if we'll get a solution on how all these government services can be offered in a way that is less frustrating, less costly, efficient, effective, and very accurate, then that will be the solution that we'll want to pick it up. For example, we've got, as a country, we've got a platform that we will call it a single stop shop for all government services, which is the e-citizen platform, where we've onboarded government services, digitized government services. And today we're speaking to about over 5,000 services are already on this particular platform. But again, that is not enough because not everything else has been onboarded in this particular platform because this is a job that is ongoing. That doesn't mean that now every citizen can access these particular services wherever place they are. I'll respond to this using an example, and I'll use myself as a use case. Sometimes last year, mid last year actually, I was moved from this capital city in Nairobi to Kisumu, where I am. And that is, Kisumu is also a city and is about 450 thereabout kilometers apart. I'm a family man with kids, of course, going to school. And some of the things that bothered me were, one, am I moving alone or am I moving with my family? Now, that speaks to something. So where are we going to settle? I'm already thinking, is there a platform or somewhere that I can already look out for and be able to know these are the available options to live in? So I'm speaking to the housing sector. the next consideration you want to ask yourself is, okay, if I was to move with my family, that is including my school-going kids, what are the available options in terms of schools that I can actually move them to or transfer them to? I'm speaking already to the education sector. Again, how is the transport arranged in that particular city? And here we're looking at public transport, right? How is it done? Again, do I have that information with me? Every other human being will require at one moment to be checked on their health status. So do we have enough hospitals around? You know, so if I could have a platform, and I've just used myself as an example to speak to all these sectors, if I could have a platform where I will interact and actually get accurate responses to those questions that I was asking myself before I moved to this new city, I think that will be the best thing that will ever have happened to me as a client or a general Kenyan, right? So these are just sectors that I would say that we can leverage on the power of technology, not necessarily AI, as you say, but the power of technology to actually get to serve people. So I think for me, it will be all government services and sectors trying to leverage on the existing technologies and see how best we can serve our citizens.
So Edmund gave us a future scenario of how public services can be powered by AI and other technologies to make it more frictionless and easy for people to access these services. Guillaume, what is your perspective on the near future trends and developments that you foresee in that particular field of AI and open source AI? And how does this translate to concrete impacts and outcomes for countries?
So you mentioned it before, but the development of small model is one big trend we see today. And the ability to put some pipeline with model embedded with other model to create, for example, AI agents, it's a very powerful trend I see. So the raise in terms of training, quality of training of those models, and so the ability to achieve the same level of performance using way less computing power is a big trend that we can see. To specialize those models for specific usage is also a very big trend. So the AI agent is, I think, for the next month, going to be the next wave of innovation. So the ability to have automated decisions made for achieving a certain goal is, I believe, a game changer in the AI development. And so the ability to create agent for public services, I think is going to be a big topic in the coming month and coming years. Another aspect that I find interesting is the development of a new architecture of model. So we have fundamental new architecture like CAN, Kolmogorov-Arnold approach, but we also have seen from our colleagues at Meta the release of a new type of architecture, which is offering a multimodal learning for those models. And so the increase of the density of information we are able to ingest in those models to train them is a game changer for the performance of those models. So those are big trends we can clearly identify. The last one that I already mentioned is the one released by Anthropic a week ago. So in the interpretability of those models, so very important to be able to have a snapshot of how the weights are behaving, the circuits in the model for a certain prompt. And they've been themselves, so they did it on one of their models, but they identified some very surprising trend and representation in the model. And so the ability to offer to the greatest number, the ability to properly govern and the computational power necessary to make sure that the model is behaving at inception phase, but all along the life of the model as intended and according to the guardrails set at the beginning is something that is very important, I think, to push as a DPG priority.
Thank you. And I'm sure you're going to stick around after the session to answer any questions people might have in this direction. I think we did a good job in bringing us back on track time-wise. We even have 5 minutes left for questions. Maybe one question and one quick answer we could do. Yep. So,
all right. I can already see one hand up.
okay, 2 questions and 2 quick answers.
Okay, then I would maybe go for the gentleman here and for the lady over there, if that is okay.
Yeah, so my question relates maybe not so much to open source AI, but it kind of came with all of the talk of AI governance. And it is like in the sense of AI governance, like how much of AI governance is actually an old question of the data we use and how it is acquired by like data scraping throughout the internet without necessarily concern for the people who created the data in the first place, such as images, text, etc., who basically enable all of these generative models, and how much is that like solving this kind of old solution of data privacy and access would actually also be a very necessary part of managing AI.
And in the interest of time, I'm gonna just go there with my microphone and pass it on and collect the second question, so we can have a batch of questions.
Awesome, thank you. I think this discussion is really important, so thank you for holding it. Yes, it's probably more of a general question. So regarding the open source AI, so there are different models, but there is almost not kind of the maybe kind of educational platforms that allow to use those AIs efficiently. So there's like almost the bottleneck that we can give it. So even though we have a lot of models that are currently available by large organizations, nobody really uses them other than the organizations. So there might be some kind of the point that we need to understand why we use it, for what reasons, and maybe create smaller models as well and open it up and maybe ask the large organizations to do that. So kind of like the adapters, what I'm not sure what is the right term here, but yeah, something similar that would allow to use these powerful tools by smaller organizations too.
Thank you. Who of you would like to answer quickly, please?
So very quickly on the first question, so there is for sure a question of data, the data quality and the data we use when we scrub the web to train the model initially in pre-training. But there is also a big question on the behavior of the model itself and the concept he's developing and how he's basically gathering all those data and creating the concepts. And so what I found particularly interesting in the paper last week published by Anthropic is the fact that even if they had a very clean data set and made sure that some aspect of the data was not in the training data set, some concepts were still getting back in the model. And the question is, when is the model generating an output using those concepts? Is today absolutely not clear. And I think in terms of interpretability, it's extremely important that we have a clear view in that regard.
Do we also have an answer on the second question? Edmund, is this something you can speak to?
Sure. I actually want to speak to the first question as well, that was talking about data governance and the use of available data sets and how that speaks to those of us that are in the space of data protection. Actually, that is one area of concern for those of us that are in the space of data protection. And we're not saying that technology and implementation of AI is bad, but our concerns as well is how does that fit into the principles of data protection? We're talking about the principle of data minimization, for example. When this chatbot and the AI is actually learning, it is using some the available data sets. But again, how sure are we, or what controls have been put in place to ensure that this information is only the learning is for the learning process and collected only specific for that learning exercise that you're talking about, to the extent that you don't leverage on the access to this availability of this large knowledge pool. So you collect much more than beyond what you needed for the learning process. We're talking about accountability issues, the principle of accountability, being an open source. really means that you cannot really hold someone accountable to what happens to as a result of using that particular model. So again, those are issues that you're also looking at as institutions so that are in the data governance and protection space. The other bit is something to do with, again, data localization. From the, I think it was, I saw a presenter that actually was speaking to a solution that had been done and was running on a local machine. That is a bit better. But there are those that will want to leverage on cloud computing and the available big data. Again, those are issues that we must look at as we engage and walk the path of governance. And the second question I spoke to, I don't know that I got her very well, but I think it was something to the tune of there are a number of AI models. However, not all are being utilized. And I want to think that that's the beauty of having open source solutions, that you can actually choose that which speaks to your need. So adoption will be based on the need, and that's why you need experts that will help you actually evaluate the available platforms to see which ones exactly are easy to coin and to train and maybe build on into your specific requirement.
All right. Thank you so much, Edmond. Thank you so much, Guillaume, for sharing all your insights on the session. This was, I hope, interesting for those of you here in the audience. And with this, I will pass it on to the closure of the session with the next two speakers, right?
Yes, thank you very much, Leah, for the moderation. And thanks as well, Edmond Wandera, for joining us virtually all the way from Nairobi, and also to Guillaume Andro. Thank you so much. Maybe one more round of applause. Now to round us off, we've got two more talks coming up, and you can tell that I'm not good at multitasking. So I would first like to welcome to the stage Ms. Jana Brugier. I hope I'm not butchering her name. Brugier, Coordinator for External Affairs and Partnerships with the Universal Postal Union, UPU. In case you're wondering, what is the UPU doing with OCs, with the ITU-OC project? They recently joined forces to also look at the use of technologies such as open source AI, but I believe also blockchain, and how to use that to make some of the services to innovate and make them more environmentally friendly. Jana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So the UPU is the Universal Postal Union. If you don't know it, it is the international organization for the postal sector. We are actually this year celebrating our 150th year. We are the second oldest international organization. And it is, the UPU is the network of the UPU is a seamless supply chain network of networks with more than 650,000 post offices across the world that cover 95% of the world population, and with more than 5 million postal workers across the world. So postal men and postal women are often trusted members of their communities. And therefore, postal offices can be a window to the world, particularly in rural and remote communities. At its core, the mission of the UPU is one of inclusivity and access to physical communication for all citizens of its 192 member countries. But because of its wide access in the world, the postal sector has also a huge potential for being a hub for digital inclusivity, facilitating access to connectivity and digital public goods, such as e-government services, e-identity, e-finance. So many postal operators, particularly in developed countries, are already using the postal network for this kind of tasks. We also have examples in developed countries where posts are using the postal network to facilitate connectivity. We have a project that we are also part of, Partner to Connect, which is connect.post, which aims to connect all postal offices to internet by 2030. So I think it's 30% of the postal offices are not connected to the internet, but also use this network to ensure more wide access to digital public goods across the world and to facilitate, to bridge the digital divide. Since the late 90s, the UPU has developed an overlay of a digital network for its networks to bridge the digital divide between them. So now this physical communication, meaning mail and parcels, has a digital twin. So this digital twin or postal data has become ubiquitous. It is highly standardized, accurate, and at content piece level. So it adds value in customer services, customs, fiscal, and security procedures. As a pure reflection of the physical world, postal data is a natural fit as training data for AI systems. As the custodian of postal data and in strict compliance with our acts, we have several initiatives in progress to leverage postal data in AI. For instance, for predictive delivery systems, but also detection of dangerous goods. And of course, in keeping with the inclusivity ethos of the UPU, postal data is to be used responsibly and benefit to all postal organizations in all member countries. We are now working with several UN organizations to see how we can better use this data. One usage of is happening right now because we are holding an UPU Innovation Challenge in Bern right now to harness the transformative power of artificial intelligence to tackle some of the most pressing challenges and unlock opportunities within the postal sector and beyond. So we are partnered with ITU in the framework of this innovation challenge. One team is working right now on developing the technical requirements to develop a postal use case in GovStack. This use case is about enabling cross-border digital government for private sector and individuals using verifiable, secure digital delivery of documents and registered emails. So by developing the open source code under GovStack, this will enable governments to deploy this service by leveraging their postal networks. Another use case that is being discussed during our challenge aims to develop AI-enabled data collection mechanisms to map the postal infrastructure. And this map is then to be connected with ITU's broadband map to use AI-enabled tools to inform digital infrastructure deployment efforts. So this is just one of the examples of the partnership that we have with ITU. We are also working together on digital transformation assessment frameworks and exploring potential collaboration on cross-sector regulation to facilitate inclusive and sustainable uptake of DPIs through the postal network. Well, as a conclusion, just to say that there's a lot that we can do with the postal network to facilitate digital inclusion. There's a lot that we can do together to use the full potential of this network and of the postal data for digital inclusion. Thank you.
Jana, thank you so much. And thanks also for presenting another example where digital public goods and also open source AI can support. Yeah.
Take questions though.
No, I would, okay. In the interest of time. Thank you so much, Jana. Now, I'd like, finally, but definitely not least, I'd like to welcome, to give some closing remarks, I'd like to welcome to the stage Ms. Noemi Bürke, who is the head of the Digital Technologies Unit and also Deputy Chief Digital Officer at our German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Noemi, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Jana, and all of you. And I'm sure you could maybe also ask some questions. I'm afraid that my flight is not waiting for me. So this is why, to be very honest, you didn't have much leverage for me here. But I'm glad that I'm still here today with you. So I really wanted to take this opportunity to thank ITU and especially the open source enabler, ecosystem enabler for the cooperation in organizing the workshop and of course the GIZ. BMZ, my ministry, greatly appreciates the past week at the World Summit on the Information Society and the AI for Good Summit. I'm really grateful that this week of digital cooperation ends with such a highlight. It was very concrete, and it was really amazing to see all the different options that we have here. So I do want to thank the participants for joining the workshop, and especially from our partner countries and the partners we're involved in with together. So the motivation for my ministry to contribute to this workshop was to show the potential of open source AI for improving public services and making them more accessible. I do believe that this workshop has created a valuable platform to exchange on how we can grow national and international ecosystems to better leverage open source AI. And as it always is with these formats, I hope you took many incentives and ideas and examples, and that the conversation will continue later on amongst yourselves, and that you can network and deepen the conversation that has started and kicked off today. So why is open source AI important for BMZ? A lot has already been said as well, also by Leah and Guillaume and others. The German government emphasizes the importance of open source approaches in the recently adopted strategy for international digital policy. So it's the first time we, as a German government, have actually adopted an international digital policy. So from a development policy perspective, which is my ministry, we should enable access to all software that promotes the SDGs. So this is the motivation that we have. We must overcome language barriers, restrictions to AI resources, and lack of specialist expertise. And we do believe that open source AI is the way to do this. Because open source approaches are more sustainable, more cost-effective, and therefore more accessible for our partner countries. Why is open source AI particularly relevant for public services? I'm afraid this is going to be a little bit repetitive here and there, but it never hurts to underscore this as well. We do believe that good public service increase efficiency of governments because they can be tailored to meet the specific local needs. Open source AI increases transparency and trust in democratic institutions and processes, all that we also heard from Leah today. To ensure democratic stability, anyone should be able to understand decision-making processes behind AI applications in public services. It's not that easy, so that is why I think this is such a powerful tool. Accessible information helps to combat mis- and disinformation and support citizens in their daily lives. We all know examples where this is not working well, so this is also an important point for us. And then another point that is important to us, the use of open source AI fosters collaboration. Public services can benefit from shared knowledge, innovations, and best practices, or good practices, as the director of the ITU likes to support. BMZ will continue to invest in this collaboration, and I hope we're together with you. Lastly, this use of open source AI in public services fosters security, reliability, and digital self-determination. They are central building blocks to the modern infrastructure. And also, as Guillaume said, it helps bridge the digital divide. So we're grateful that today's workshop also identified the potential risks related to AI that must be avoided. As BMZ, we particularly highlight the value of common international standards and a trustworthy, human-centric approach in AI governance to avert those potential risks. Use cases have shown today the possibilities of AI to increase efficiency, innovation, and participation of citizens worldwide, and to advance the SDGs. So I am grateful that the workshop today was able to showcase also the potential of AI applications in public administration firsthand. So again, we're really thankful for this fruitful conversation, panel discussion. We are also very proud and glad to work with like-minded partners like the ITU and the Open Source Ecosystem Enabler, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We are looking forward to further collaboration and welcome that so many of our esteemed partners are really actively organizing hackathons and conferences. We believe that international cooperation and collaboration is the central cornerstone to advocating for and developing open source AI, and this is why I keep mentioning that word so many times. To do so, my ministry will continue to promote local language datasets that can help governments to inform their citizens with AI-based applications in their languages. These applications will be built on open AI models, be it for chatbots or information platforms, and you all have valuable insights and experiences that will help improve these approaches. Let me just mention briefly two initiatives that we have and that we're fostering. It's the Fair Forward initiative and the GovStack initiative that I think most of you know about by now. And through these initiatives, BMZ will further invest in creating chatbot technology as open source building blocks, which government agencies can easily reuse for making their services more easily accessible to citizens in their languages. So really, let me stop here today, but I thank you for being here today, for being in this workshop, for contributing to this important topic. And I really hope you enjoyed the workshop just as much as I did. And I do wish you to have many more interesting discussions and sessions today. And yes, have a good lunch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noemi, for your parting words. And if I may add, I think it's also very exciting, and I'm happy to hear also you to stress the importance of open source AI and digital public goods for public services. So thank you so much. And yeah, please make sure to catch your flight on time. Thank you. Now, with that, we have actually come to the end of our workshop. Thank you to all of you who are here with us. Those of you who've joined maybe for the last session, maybe if there are any who joined for most of the day, thank you so much. I'm not sure if there's still coffee out there. I hope there is. If you want to stay in touch, I just put two contacts on there by David Mosse from the ITU Open Source Ecosystem Enabler Project and my own contact. So please feel free if you have any further questions. If you have more questions to Jana Brugier, I'm sure maybe you'll see her outside, and thank you so much.